I call to order the February 28th, 2022 school board meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. We are in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building at 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley? Here. Dr. Jessup Banger?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Ms. Neufeld? Here. Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Mr. Doman?
Here.
Kate Pluta? Here.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. For those tuning in at home on the Zoom, we do have the live transcript option enabled. So if you want that, please click on that button so you can do that. I'm told it is mostly accurate, so apologize in advance for any mistakes there. Next, we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items. So if anyone would like to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda, we'll start with those in the room. You can come forward and state your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Deb Falk-Pellick, 7435 West Wells Street. I wanted to make my public comment tonight about public comment and what occurred at the school board meeting on February 14th, where abruptly procedure was changed to not allow for public comment. And it did seem like some confusion. And when I went back and looked at the in-service that was referenced, it was on September 17th and 18th that the board met in 2021. And I found it interesting that 5 months later is when a change went into place. So I'm not exactly sure what the procedure and policy is, but should there have been public comment on the idea itself? Should notice have been given to the public that public comment was being eliminated? And should the board have had action with a vote before that happened? So it was confusing to people. I'd like to suggest that if there are differences on the board regarding public comment, I know that some members have told community members that we do more than other communities, whether it's cities or school districts. And I don't think we need to bring ourselves less than other communities. It's okay to be better and do more and engage the public more. But at this point, I would suggest and ask that you let the public know what the new rules are, not just like a little blurb at the beginning of the meeting and then nobody knows what's going on. I appreciate the teacher that got up and spoke too about this at the end of the meeting. So we just need to know if you're changing things, let people know how it's happening. And then we learned on Saturday at the listening session, Dr. Means had let everybody know that the special education audit is complete. So I'd like to ask the board to work with expediency to put that on the agenda. It's time. We need to start talking about this. And I ask that that gets done sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Any other public comment from someone in the room? Then we will go to folks online. If you're online and you want to make a public comment on non-agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing none in the room, Jamie, is there anyone online?
We do have one attendee, BJ Ermans. You have the microphone.
Yes, thank
Please
you very
state your
much.
name
My
and
name
address.
is BJ Ermans. I live at 2749 North 75th Street, and I am a member of the Wauwatosa Commission for Persons with Disabilities. I would like to thank Superintendent Means for including a virtual option for the input and the listening sessions. And I would also like to give a shout out to the excellent monitor who handled the people online and managed the questions. It was very professionally done and very responsive. And I actually do want to reiterate my expectation that anytime there will be listening sessions, there shall always be a captioned virtual session. that will be available to people who cannot appear in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else online, Jamie?
Yes. Mary Jo Randall, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Mary Jo Randall, 727 North 59th Street. I'm calling or commenting on the curriculum and instruction audit that was presented at the last meeting. And again, in the context of no public comment being allowed on that. Dr. Means did give a very comprehensive overview of that, as well as a plan for addressing it. So when public comment was shut down on that at the last meeting, we were told, no problem, it'll be brought up at the next meeting. It is, of course, not on the agenda, so none of the presentation materials that were shown to the public at that meeting are shown tonight. So any public comment tonight on that curriculum audit is watered down and irrelevant to anybody who didn't see it last week. This is not acceptable. Again, this is important. This is our kids learning how to read, our kids learning how to write. This is not acceptable that you present an audit with very disappointing results and shut down the discussion. Thank you.
Anyone else online, Jamie?
There are no more hands raised.
All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action?
Please, may we have separate discussion on the Ebony Grice resignation?
Okay, so we'll pull that up. Mr. Rowell.
Without objection, I'd like to remove the item related to Ms. Cindy Nolette.
And can we take that as a friendly amendment? Are there any objections to that? We will remove that item. You can note that, Ms. Newman.
And a friendly amendment, there is a mistake in the year for the resignation of Josh Heisdorf at Jefferson Elementary. It should read October 21st, 2021.
Thank you. Any objections to that friendly amendment? All right, Mr. Meyer has asked to remove Ms. Grice from the consent agenda.
May I have the floor, please?
I think we can vote on the rest of the consent agenda,
okay.
and we'll come back to Ms. Grice if that's okay.
Well, we may not have to vote separately if you would, if I could.
Okay, I thought you wanted a separate vote.
Separate discussion.
Separate discussion.
I want to be respectful of Ms. Grice's wishes for resignation. My question is, we have had a number of departures, and I suggest that the board request an exit interview with Ms. Grice so that we can speak with her as a board if she's willing to come in to talk with us. And that's my process request. So I'm fine with it being included in the consent agenda vote this evening. Just that request be heard. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? All right, we'll move on to community comment on the consent agenda for vote. Anyone in the room that would like to make a comment on the consent agenda, please come forward, state your name and address. Seeing none. Jamie, is there anyone online?
We do have one hand raised. BJ Ermans, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Thank you very much. I'm BJ Ermans, still at the same address. In reaction to Mr. Meyer's statement, I would like to ask a question. Actually, is it not standard policy to have an exit interview with everyone who departs the district?
Thank you. Questions you can actually submit via the website under the school board heading. That's the best place for questions. The school board meeting is a place for you to advocate for a position. Unfortunately, we don't have a question and answer set.
Okay, excuse me though, do you not know the answer, or is it that I can't get an answer at this time? I have to submit it through email? Or
yeah, that's That's the best avenue to get questions answered.
Okay.
Any other hands raised, Jamie?
There are no more hands raised.
Oh, we need a motion and a second.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Ms. Rowland. Second. Thank you, Dr. Finger. Thank you, Ms. Newman. Please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes. All right, we'll move on to human resources action item. Ms. Mufeld.
Thank you. It is recommended that the school board approve the contract with the Proton Group to continue services with FileBound for 36 months effective May 4th, 2022, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. We move in a second. Dr. Means, is there anything to add? Any questions or comments from the board? We discussed this at the February 14th meeting. Seeing none, we'll go to community comment on this item. If you have a question or if you have a comment or something you'd like to advocate for, please come forward. Seeing none, Jamie, is there anyone online?
There are no hands raised.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes. We move on to superintendent action items, approval of the Esser funds plan. Mr. Rowland.
it is recommended that the school board approve the Esser funds plan as presented at the February 14th, 2022 meeting, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Mufeld. Dr. Means, do you want to have any statements? Got it. We've got a presentation first.
Just, is there a way to help with the feedback in the room? I know it's, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. This is a follow-up to the presentation that was made on February 14th. As we presented 2 weeks ago, there were 3 phases of Esser funds that were presented to the school district. The first phase of Esser dollars were presented to school districts through a passage of legislation at the federal level in March of 2020. It was primarily focused on using dollars for PPEs and cleaning. The second phase of Esser dollars came in December of 2020. The focus of that expenditure and that money was to help school districts bring students back into school from an in-person standpoint. In March 2021, there was a third phase of Esser dollars provided to school districts. And if I can go to the next timeline, the challenge with the Esser 3 funds was that while it was passed in March of 2021, the Wisconsin state plan was not approved by the United States Department of Education until December 6th of 2021. Even with passage by the United States Department of Education, the Joint Finance Committee had to approve the Wisconsin plan back at the state level. That approval did not occur until February of 2022, or a few weeks ago. Understanding that the state of our ESSER 3 funds were uncertain, our school district decided to wait until there was approval. Once approval did occur, we started the process of engaging the community. That initial engagement started on February 14th. But when you take a look at the next chart on the presentation, there was a number of different engagement opportunities provided to all types of stakeholders, families, staff members, students. We even reached out to a specific interest group of special education families or families with students with special needs. All of those stakeholder opportunities were provided. We received a total of 124 responses to the survey that allows stakeholders to prioritize the different proposals that were provided and shared with the public on February 14th. We had a total of 41 community members attend 4 different listening sessions that the school district provided. There were numerous reminders to our educational community that they had the ability to review the PowerPoint and take the survey if they were not interested in attending listening sessions. And through that process, Tim, I'm not sure what happened there, but no, sir. I can move it out. Thank you. Based on the feedback that were provided, there were a number of different tiers that were provided in terms of how the community prioritized the proposals. In tier 1, our community prioritized the behavioral specialists, an increase in mental health support staffing. You'll see in the addendum that's on board docs, in the listening session or focus group with students, they indicated, as you shared at the last meeting, that the term counselor could be a deterrent for students to engage that professional. And so we've landed on the title of mental health support staff at the secondary level. 5 academic interventionalists or specialists that will help students who are struggling academically. The creation of a director of student services position to help students, families, staff, and administration at the school level deal with students who are challenging from a behavioral standpoint. And then the development of an alternative placement classroom for chronically disruptive students. That's how our community prioritized the proposals. There was a tier 1.5. That tier 1.5 came into the form of securing mentoring services for chronically disruptive students through a partnership with Mentor Milwaukee. Then you can see where tier 2 and tier 3 lands. I would just note that we've bolded, we put in bold the proposals that will eventually land in the final recommendations. While they were in tier 2 and tier 3, I will explain to you why they still move forward with the final recommendations. So in the feedback that was provided to us, there are some themes. The first was sustainability. And I think what I took away from this process is that there are a number of community members who want to have deeper conversations around where budget allocations go. As I tried to convey and share, these are ESSER dollars that will go away in 2 years. The discussion that people wanted to engage around was more in depth in terms of, so where are we going as a school district? Where are we investing? Why are we investing in certain initiatives? That's a deeper, larger strategic conversation that should be embedded with strategic planning and budgeting overall. Our narrow focus with the Esser dollars was to identify where we can help our students and our staff and our schools really rebound from COVID-19 and move forward. I was pleased that our community wanted to have a conversation around the concept of these are good proposals and they should be sustained. So that's the takeaway I took from the conversation. The second is support. Students and staff alike are seeking support in order to navigate the current environment immediately. They are stating that they need more people in schools to help with the various needs of all of our students. Suspect. The students were suspect of the term counselor. I had to find an S somewhere. So students prefer the use of to use a title other than counselor to designate the specialist, but they were indeed in support of that support and that position in their schools. Special education. Special education advocates sought support in the Esser plan, not the special education Esser dollars. As we explained on February 14th, there's special dollars for special education that has been set aside. There's an extra $389,000 in additional IDEA funds that have been placed in the special education budget. But special education advocates specifically asked to make sure that the needs of special education students were identified in the Esser plan. It is there. And then social. There was advocacy for supporting all students and ensuring school is fun again and a safe place. One of the most salient feedback points that I received during our listening sessions was that some of our proposals were pejorative in nature, that they were focused on dealing with children who were chronically disruptive or students who were struggling. And it's really incumbent on us to make sure that we provide support for all students. And there are a number of students who are quiet, who may not be chronically disruptive, but they also deserve our support. And so this is where I would just classify this in terms of social. So again, there were three focus areas of academic restoration, student social, emotional, and mental health, and expanding student, family, inclusion, and belonging opportunities. Those were the focus areas for our proposals. The final recommendation for the board includes the following. To move forward with our advanced and gifted coordinators. The feedback received in listening sessions is that we do only have a half-time gifted and talented teacher for a school district of 7,200 students. So how we are moving forward and meeting the needs of those students as well as our students who are struggling should be considered when we move out of this COVID-19 environment. So while it was not ranked highly in our survey results, I believe that it should move forward. Our elementary academic specialists, those are 5 there. You will note in the addendum that's in board docs, it is our goal and the feedback received during the listening sessions that while we have 5 of these positions funded through Esser, that we need to work hard to have another 5 funded through our permanent budget. So every school has an academic specialist to support students. That it would be too difficult to have one person split between 2 schools if we're truly trying to meet the needs of all students. The third is increased mental health support specialists at the secondary level. That's having someone with those skills at each of our secondary schools. 5 elementary behavioral specialists, a director of student success, as we discussed earlier, of making sure that staff members, principals, students, and families have someone that they can collaborate with in the district as we're dealing with behavioral issues. Increase our special education teacher staffing for our 18 to 21-year-old services by half teacher, and also increasing our special education assistants in the 18 to 21 service area by one assistant. Also providing curricular resources for our special education students. There are often times where our special education staff have to create alternative curriculum. They're unable to use the same curriculum that our general education students use, and to make sure that there are funds put aside for that staff when they're dealing with those issues. It was poignant and appropriate that during one of our listening sessions, one of our community members made the statement that many of our kids and students are self-medicating during this time period. And so focusing on alcohol, tobacco, and other drug professional learning for all staff was something that we felt was important to put into this final recommendation. And then finally, it's been discussed in many quarters and many pockets of this community, but enhancement of the school culture and opportunities. We have programs and clubs at our schools, making sure that our schools have ample funds to run things like Link Crew and sponsor new clubs and support new field trips. Ensuring that it's not an issue of money that gets in the way of our professionals, and ensuring that there are some type of events that we can provide for students to make them feel fun and safe at schools again. There's still a total of $646,000 available unencumbered after we make those investments for 2 years. And so the recommendation for a one-time purchase, things that we would not have the ability to purchase any other way, would be to move forward with our English language arts professional learning. As you heard from the audit last meeting, we have a lot of work to do in supporting our teachers in teaching and using our new curriculum. We haven't done a good job in providing that professional learning. This should be the time to make sure that we're supporting staff. We have emergency walkie-talkies or radios that we use in our schools, but our principals have identified to us that they do not have enough of those radios. And so this would be a good one-time purchase of another 55 radios across the district. They're about $550 per radio. Our buildings and grounds team needs another work truck. You approved one earlier this school year, but they are in need of a second work truck. This will go towards a work truck for them. We've talked about the challenges of transportation all school year and how there's a shortage of bus drivers and school buses available for our students for various activities. This would allow us to have more flexibility in having passenger vans available within the district. Our librarians have identified that they consistently and annually have to pay a library subscription fee for a number of different softwares and certain obligations in the libraries. If the district were able to pick up that $77,000 subscription fees that they have to pay throughout the year, it would give them the ability to reallocate those funds to restocking our libraries and get new books for students. And then finally, the school district is in need of a new data warehouse that will allow us to utilize student performance data in a more vibrant way, utilizing the remaining dollar amount of $110,000 to go towards that expenditure would be our recommendation. I'm pleased to say that the city of Wauwatosa has informed the school district that they are willing to consider, and I have to make a presentation tomorrow night, but we have to make a presentation to the city of Wauwatosa for 2 additional community social workers. The city has made it very clear that the presentation of these two social workers have to be community social workers. They can't solely focus on the needs of students in Wauwatosa. There may be a family that has children who attend private or parochial schools. We have to make sure that we're making these social workers available to those students as well as and those families as well. But we will be making that presentation. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to partner with the city and utilize their $24 million in emergency rescue funds for this expenditure. So the final recommendation here is to approve our Esser proposal so we can start the process of hiring for new staff. That's a lot of new people that we're trying to bring into the organization. The sooner we can have the ability to start posting and pursuing good staff members, the better. We're also asking the board to consider the approval of the one-time purchases. I put in parentheses in concept for the simple reason all of these purchases exceed the $20,000 policy threshold. It will come back to you as a formal proposal once we release RFPs. And then finally, we would like to have the ability to submit our plan because we do believe that we've engaged the community in a diligent manner and we met the needs of everyone who engaged us, that we can submit our plan by March 11th. That's the recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Means. Start with any board questions or comments. Mr. Meyer.
Yes, Dr. Means, on the question of sustainability, I suggest that I have faith that you are going to identify things that we are doing now that aren't having the outcomes that we want. And that perhaps you'll identify some things that aren't effective. And when the sustainability question comes up in 3 years, that maybe some funds can be sourced in that regard. Also, typically the best way to fund things is to attract enrollment. So I fully believe that your efforts will bear fruit with regards to these Esser programs, and we will increase our attractiveness to families looking to place their children in school, and that will provide some of the funding. So that is how I look at it. I think it's perhaps too optimistic to hope that we'll find cuts in other areas, but not too optimistic to think that you will identify some things that in good faith we tried, and these, for example, these Esser items that you have are actually the things producing the positive results. So as you architect your program here, I think some of this will take care of itself. So thank you.
Any other board questions or comments from Dr. Means?
Thank you. My questions are along the same lines. I'm almost thinking I'm approving this in a bubble because I wouldn't want to have to non-renew positions in a year from now. And I'm also worried about the actual people available in the field to recruit, since we have such a teacher shortage. So I don't want this to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we do need these professionals in our district. I'm not certain of the path forward now beyond this special funding.
Mr. Rowland.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to echo what Ms. Neufeld said in regards to just the sustainability of this item tacked on to the item that's coming later to us. With this, we would add $950,000 in ongoing costs, right? And then the item later is another 1.1 million in ongoing costs. So it comes out to about north of $2 million we would have to find on an annual basis. And I'm not, to Mr. Meyer's point, I'm not saying it's impossible or improbable that we'll do that. It's just I don't know how we'll do that. So it's difficult to make that leap without knowing where we're going. So I guess the main question I've got is, do we have to vote on this tonight? I know we're trying to hire folks, but my guess is that we wouldn't hire folks for this school year. It would be for the next school year, right? So I just wonder if we could spend a little, I ask it to everybody, is if we spend a couple weeks just going through, okay, how would we actually make this possible? I don't know. It's difficult to say we're going to increase our operating budget by $2 million and not know where the money's coming from. I've got 2 meetings left, so it won't be for me to figure out necessarily. But I don't want to put the next person in the seat in a position where they've got to figure out $2 million of funding from somewhere. That feels unfair to that person and to each of you. So I put that out there is how would we like to address that?
How would you address the idea that we would miss the DPI reporting on March 11th? So if we put this out for a couple of weeks, we won't be able to file a report with the DPI.
Okay, that's helpful. No, that's helpful context. And I guess we don't have to, this would be an approval and then each of the items would come back to us. So if we need to submit something, then I understand the need to submit something to hit the deadline. It's a risk.
I completely understand that. That's the same questions. It's really.
So I'd like to start by just speaking to what you just raised and just speaking publicly about why we've been put in this position. Wisconsin was one of the last states to have its application approved by the federal government because of what happened at the legislature in terms of how it was framed. And the US DOE was basically put in a position where they didn't know whether or not they could even approve Wisconsin's emergency money, which is why we got this information back so late, which is why school boards across the state of Wisconsin are being put in this position. And I appreciate what you're raising, Sean, because these are very scary things. You don't want to spend money that you don't know where it's coming from 2 years down the road. And so I just want the public to understand that. Other states where their plans were approved upwards of 6 months before ours. Wisconsin was one of the absolute last to be approved. The second thing I want to call out is that while this is staffing heavy and I have some concerns about the numbers, I'm also worried about the feedback that not just that we heard in our own feedback loops, but what we are hearing around the country, which is schools need more people in buildings and working with leadership to try and do the academic recovery, to do the student support, to do the professional support that is in response to the last 2 years. And so I know I was looking at like, what are more one-time expenditures? I tried to look at other districts to say, where are they spending their money on one-time stuff? There's only so much stuff that you can do with one-time money. And what makes a district great are its teachers, are its staff. And so I'm struggling between I feel like we need the staff in order to make the changes. And it does worry me that we don't know where the money's going to come from. And what I would be interested, Dr. Means, you responding to is where it's sort of like some of these positions existed in previous capacities within the district. Like, what are they doing that hasn't been getting done? Or is this in some ways some chairs just being shifted where, you might have some folks that are currently coaches moving into the academic specialist positions? And does that mean that the coach position maybe doesn't get refilled? Because that's where I think that there might be some opportunities with staffing costs where, to Mr. Meyer's point, I am trying not to think of this as $950,000 on top of. I think it's probably we're going to make some changes in terms of when people move and shift, and we're going to see what's working and what's not working. The other thing I just wanted to throw out there, and I know other board members got this email, but it wasn't until like the final hour, 4:52. We did get an email from a teacher about how we might use funding specifically in the secondary schools around advisory. And when I think about where our schools are struggling right now in terms of the loss of community and kids needing to like be in like their school little family groups and whatnot, kids are having to like relearn how to engage with one another. They're saying like, you know, should I send this text? Should I not send this text? It's like sort of like we're all out of practice in terms of how to interact. And I know that advisory has come up in the last several years in a lot of different ways about like, how could we maximize that time, either for additional academic support for kids or building smaller communities within a large school. And if we're thinking about one-time money, if I look at that last slide that had like vans and the data warehouse and everything, those are things we need, don't get me wrong. But if I think about money that we spend that has the biggest impact on the largest number of kids, I think there might be an opportunity in there. But again, it came in at 452. It's not fully explored, but I do like the idea of being able to spend some of our one-time funding on leveraging things that already exist and making them stronger and better. Not calling out this teacher because I don't know if they want to be named or not named, but I really appreciated the creativity and the leadership shown to just say like, hey, build on the teachers you have who have contact with these kids, and let's think about how we can use some of that money perhaps to write curriculum or to ensure that they're able to do fun things, which goes to the other bucket of money on enhancement of school culture and opportunities. I just don't think that's enough for what the teacher was putting forth.
I'll weigh in on the idea of adding these positions, because I think that's a good one, right? How do we fund it in 2 years? And I didn't add up the positions, Dr. Means, how many we're adding, but is it 20, 25-ish? Not even that much. So if we figure we have 800 staff and we have a 10% turnover rate, which is optimistic these days, I would say, that's 80 people a year that we'd potentially, we're going to lose and replace and retire and all those types of things. Organizations 10 to 15% turnover rate these days is about where you're at best. Teachers might be even worse. So that means in the next 2 years, there's potentially at least 160 people that are going to come and go, or go, I should say. So I think that gives future boards, Dr. Means, flexibility to say, which positions do we refill? How do we reshuffle the deck? What does that look like? So yes, we are committing ourselves to these positions, but I think in 2 years, there is flexibility to say, okay, these positions have left. Have we seen the return that we want with these positions? And if no, then do we sort of reshuffle the deck at that time? But in my mind, these are positions that we know are needed. The public has asked for these positions. Students have asked for these positions. We know they're immediately needed today. So my vote's going to be yes, because I know that they're needed today, and I'm confident that there's levers to be pulled in 2 years to figure out if these are still the right positions in 2 years.
Dr. Means, can you paint a picture for us of if we're successful in 2 years with these investments, what things will be in place? What things will have changed? What will the success measure be with these interventions?
So let me start by sharing with you the feedback I've received from staff. The feedback I've received from staff is that they don't have, at the elementary level, they don't have enough people to support students who are academically struggling. So who provides that intervention for them? That's not very clear right now. We task our reading specialists to do that work, but they're torn between either being reading coaches to teachers or interventionalists for young people who are struggling academically. And as we talked about last meeting, we don't have anyone who is attending to our curriculum at the ELA level. So each reading specialist is tasked to also shepherd and guide their individual school. So reading specialists are technically, they're stretched and divided into 3 different roles that they have to try to play. Our classroom teachers have said, how am I supposed to teach a classroom of 22 students if 5 to 6 of them are 2 grades behind grade level? I can't catch those kids up and meet the needs of the students who are on grade level, and heaven forbid, the students who are on grade level or beyond, we only have a 0.5 gifted and talented teacher for the entire district. So that's the logic behind that staffing. Staff members have said, we don't have enough support to handle students who are chronically disruptive. They're sent out of the classroom because they have disrupted the learning environment. They're sent to the office. And what's demoralizing, this is the feedback I hear from parents, staff, and students, is demoralizing to then see that same student return back to the class an hour later. Because there are no strategies to help that student regulate their behavior. So that's the logic behind the behavioral specialists. We've talked about the mental health needs of our secondary students and the fact that, and I thought the feedback was timely and appropriate. The students have said, don't call them counselors because we see counselors in a different light. But if you can call them a mental health support specialist, now we know who to go to when I'm depressed and I may be quiet, or I may be depressed and I'm not quiet and I'm disruptive. So what will our schools look like? I think our schools look like a place where the support that people are asking for, the order that parents are demanding, would actually start to come into play. For the families who are saying we need to see more academic rigor in our schools, or we have to make some other decisions in terms of our residency, that's the logic behind the advanced and gifted coordinators. Because right now, many of those students sit in classrooms and they're not getting the true extension of learning that they deserve. They're, in many ways, they're being told, go read a more advanced book and I'll try to deal with you when I can. So I know we're talking a lot about what our budget can or cannot do. This is a reflection of what we're not doing as an organization and what the ideal would be. We've talked a lot about, well, how do you sustain this and what do you have to cut? There are other methods of meeting this threshold as well. It could mean advocacy at the state level to make sure that state funding is appropriate. That's an entire conversation we haven't talked about yet. And there are certain school systems that look at operational budgets and operational referendums, and making sure that there's an operational referendum to make sure that we're funding the school system at the level in which the staff is telling us that they need it to be staffed at. So how does our school system look different? I think it looks different in a lot of different ways. And I appreciate the feedback that everyone has provided, because while $30,000 may not be where we want it to be, but it's a good starting point for staff members who want to take on the challenge of recalibrating and retooling our advisory committee and our advisory curriculum. Right now, we don't have any dollars allocated for that type of work. I think we look like a very different school system. We look like a responsive school system if these positions are addressed.
As we sit on the cusp of March and March Madness, there's the conversation of what are the last 4 out. And I'm curious, I know we are tiptoeing towards our strategic planning process. And there's been a lot of conversations that we've been having throughout the year of where we want the district to be. I'm curious because I think I think a couple of these things are, I loved your explanation, I think, in talking us through all that of what, the why, and what do things look like, and how does it address what we're seeing and hearing at this moment in time after the pandemic, or as we near maybe the end of the pandemic. But I'm wondering what are the other things that if we had a bit more, and there's not more in this bucket, but what other things we could advocate for, fundraise for, look for other resources in different places that came up for you that I'm curious about that we can't do now maybe, but we should be striving for as soon as we can.
I think the 14 proposals that were presented to you on February 14th ran the spectrum of items that we collectively felt the district needed. And the engagement of 124 people taking the survey and prioritizing those items was helpful. And now we have a better sense of what people believe in. I think the fact that people came out for listening sessions and advocated for certain perspectives, their voices were clearly heard and are represented within this final recommendation. So I think there are a lot of different things that that reached either level, tier 2 or tier 3, based on the surveys of people prioritizing them. We'll have to try to find a way to sustain the ones that we're bringing forward. And if there is additional funds, or if there's a way to advocate for additional funds at the state level, then that's when we can consider those items. But when I go to classrooms and schools daily, I hear staff members say, we need more support. That's what I hear. If we're just going to talk brass tacks, when the Jefferson situation happened earlier this year, the staff said we didn't have enough support, and it was mainly in these areas where the staff said, we're getting these students who are academically challenged. We're unable to meet their needs. We need support. We have students and families who have behavioral issues. We need support. You're asking us to do all of these different things, and we're unable to do it. When I talk to our secondary leaders and principals, and when I look at all the different administrative hearings I've had this year with students who have had behavioral challenges, it's been in the realm, many of them, in the realm of mental health needs. And again, I can't say it enough that the salient statement that was made to me during one of our listening sessions was, and your proposals are honing in on chronically disruptive students. There are literally thousands of kids who are quiet and they're still dealing with the same level of depression in our secondary schools and beyond. The more we can give them support, in addition to the ones who are, I believe discipline is a way for students to share with us how they're struggling. And that's just another way of communication for them. But there are a lot of young people who are quiet. You've asked me to do an environmental scan of the organization. The environmental scan of the organization, and we're going to talk about it later because it was referenced earlier. The environmental scan is our teachers, when you compare it to other school systems in the metropolitan area, we're grossly underpaid. They're not paid well. They're just not. And so that became a priority for me. And we worked on it. You also asked me to do an environmental scan to say, so how can we lift up our performance as a school system? These are the positions that I had. This is not Damon Mean saying we need these positions. This is me listening to staff. This is me listening to, and candidly, we're not doing all the things I would love for us to be able to do, because you have to prioritize and cut it off at some point. But your staff members and your families, our families, are saying these are the things we need in order to continue to believe in the school district.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I wish to try to, with my opinions at least, speak to some of the concerns. I believe, the leading advocate around to match one-time costs with one-time revenue and to match ongoing recurring costs with ongoing recurring revenue. So what's going on with me here? I support this. I know, we get a laugh. I better explain myself if I'm going to deviate from my basic core philosophy. Our children have gone through 2 years of trauma, emotional trauma, through this COVID thing. These funds are to deal with the consequences of the 2 years of trauma. So the purpose of the funds, we are matching our proposal to the purpose of the funds. Now, another thing that's going on here is that doing this stuff here that Dr. Means recommends, this is on a scale that we have not tried before, to my knowledge, to my understanding. This might be our one chance to really try this and find out what happens. And we may find that it really, really works. We may find that it doesn't work, but at least we're going to know finally that this kind of solution strategy, whether it does or does not work, after the 2 years, probably a year and a half into this, we'll be able to see some outcomes. We'll know what to do then. We'll know whether these programs here can be kept in place and other things discontinued because maybe we don't need them. Maybe these programs are so successful, we attract more enrollment and that will fund a lot of things. Or maybe these things don't work and we just continue them. But unless we try, we will never know. And, 18 years on the board here, this is like a proposal of a scale I don't recall that anybody has ever tried. And the children now certainly do need these services. So I would deviate from my basic core philosophy to say, yeah, let's do this for these 2 years. Let's give this a shot. And it's a very good plan that Dr. Means has. It has the support of the community. I don't know what better we could do than to try this. Otherwise, in our lives, we'll never know. Thanks.
Any other board comments?
I do just feel like I want to share one thing, and that was I had a teacher reach out to me totally unsolicited this weekend to say that this proposal gave them faith that there is possibility for real change. That it's an elementary school teacher, and the specialists and the ELA stuff really spoke to them. And it was completely unsolicited.
Thank you.
And this is, I guess I would just add, this is not two things. One, there are some people who are used to working on a 2-year runway. In higher education, there are 2-year grants that happen. We're not used to that in K-12 public education, but there are people who are used to that type of space and work. The second is we had a very lively listening session on Saturday. We had 18 people there. It was fantastic. And there was a teacher there who made the statement, don't just give us 5 academic interventionalists. That's not going to do it. And stop comparing us to other school districts, because if you really want to do the comparison, those school districts have the staff that we do not have. So what I would share with you is that we're starting behind. One reason why this may seem like a shock to the system is because it is a shock to this system. But these are supports that most school systems have. It was the teacher, she was so kind. She kind of turned to her neighbor and said, "Can I say that to him?" And I said, "Of course you can." I don't learn unless people share. But that staff member, I'm glad she said it, because there are schools that we want to compare ourselves to. There's an academic interventionist in each of their schools that's honing in and saying, this is the work I need to do to help those students and lift themselves up. We don't have that support for our teachers. We don't have the type of support of, and I'm very leery of this. Administrators like to throw around the word differentiate instruction. That's easier said than done when you have a group of kids in front of you and you have to teach 2 or 3 different lessons. That's one thing I try to stay away from. The other I try to stay away from is using the terminology that we want to build the capacity of staff as they're dealing with difficult students. That's easier said than done. And so to have someone who's going to walk alongside you and support you when you have students who are challenged, it is necessary. The stories I hear from parents, and I meet with parents on a weekly basis now, who are saying that the disciplinary issues in the schools are so challenging that if we don't address them, they're going to make decisions. That's the logic behind those behavioral specialists. That's the logic. And I talk to principals every day who are trying to figure out how not to exclude students, but candidly, in some cases, I've had principals say this: if I don't get control of what's happening with the student, I'm going to lose their classmates in terms of understanding what's good behavior, and I may lose teachers who will go to other districts. So I guess I never viewed this as audacious or large. I viewed this as a necessity for us to be the type of district that everyone espouse and say we want to be. If this is the district you want us to be, then these are the staff. This is how you support your teachers. This is how you support community members who want to stick in here and stay in the community. Sorry, I could go on, and maybe it's because those 41 people who came out to the listening sessions, I'm trying to communicate what they shared with me. And what they shared with me was, and so Leanne, thank you for sharing that, but I think the word that I've been hearing a lot the last couple of weeks is hope. People want hope. People are very leery when I continue to look them in the eye and say, no, we're going to turn things around. They kind of shrug their shoulders and they say, I've heard it before, and then they walk away. I'm trying collectively to lift up their voices, represent what they're asking for, and then share with them that there is a reason for hope.
So we've kind of had a conversation here. Dr. Means has shared some of his thoughts. I think I'd like to go, I suspect we'll have public comment on this, so I'd like to go to public comment now and then certainly come back to all of you if you kind of want to talk again after public comment, but give us some time to kind of think about what we've talked about so far. So with that, we'll move to community comment on this Esser funds item. We will start with people in the room. Please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts. And I'm sorry, if you are online and you want to speak to us, please raise your hand now. So when we're done in the room, we can come to you.
Hello, Joe McLoop, 772 North 116th Street. First up, I'm expressing a little bit concerned about the fact that the report in its final iteration, it was not put online until the last minute. So under the new format for comment, it should have been put out earlier so people could view it and be able to be prepared to make comments. After saying that, though, I do support this plan. Our district has big problems. In order to address big problems, we have to have bold actions. And it's been said before, if this body is not willing to take bold actions, we need to find people that will. If we look at the districts in which we would normally hold ourselves up to under the academic reports, we're in last place. And we need to do something to solve that problem. And this might help us get to the point where we can solve that problem. We went backwards over the past couple of years because of the pandemic. And we're not looking to get far above that. We're looking to get back to at least where we were before the pandemic struck in order to solve those problems. Need I remind you, these problems occurred, unfortunately, under your watch. We now to take the actions that are appropriate in order to solve these problems. And it's going to be up to you to vote appropriately to take those actions. Yes, there's going to be issues when it comes to, are these sustainable? But we need to try something, and we need to try it now. Please vote to approve this plan.
Hi, Jenny Hoig, 1761 Church Street. Just wanted to say I really appreciate how thoughtful everyone has been about how this money will be spent. I was able to attend one of the listening sessions, and it was really nice to have a conversation about some of the priorities in the district. From the original proposal, a lot of the mental health pieces have been kind of cut out of this final plan, which I do understand. There are other priorities. And I appreciate the places where there will be mental health funding spent. I just want to be thoughtful about who is going to really, the number of people who will really benefit from those few positions that are out there or that are proposed. It's going to be primarily kids who are going to be needing like therapy in the school building, which is going to be a small handful. I mean, realistically, somebody can only see, I don't know, maybe 40 students in a week if you're doing short therapy sessions. So that's not very many students when we're talking about one position at each secondary school. I would just encourage you all to think about how we could build in maybe a more consistent curriculum around socio-emotional learning that starts in the JK level and kind of builds a common language for all of our students at all grade levels, that the teachers are using, that the staff are using, and that the students are using, so that we can kind of continue to build on resiliency and coping, and we're not just kind of playing catch up all the time, but really we're preventing some of these problems from the get-go. Thank you.
Deb Fogg-Pellick. I attended 2 of the listening sessions, not because I'm an overachiever or anything, but the Saturday one, Dr. Means is right. It was very lively. And there was one gentleman who said, this is an absolute mess in our district. And what we heard last week on February 14th with the curriculum audit for the 200 and some odd people online. If you haven't listened to that, fast forward to minute marker 41 and listen to that. And the group really broke it down to, we need this academic support. There's been no leadership. There really hasn't, from what Dr. Means was describing in that curriculum audit. This did occur under your watch, school board members. It did. And the former administrator, and in the Saturday meeting, when the gentleman said, it's a mess, he's inherited this mess, he's tried to take all of these ideas. I was at 2 of the 4 meetings, and I can see the ideas of the public reflected in this plan that he has taken. And I thought it was great. The teachers, I met some new teachers at that meeting, and they just took it down to 2 basic things. We need academic help. We need behavioral help. So I am in support of this, and clearly I'm happy about some of the special ed stuff in there. And I just want to also remind from the February 14th meeting that special ed funding, the $389,000, I believe it was Mr. Meyer who asked for a spreadsheet to see how we have spent that. And I know it came up in one of the meetings so far, so I'm not sure if that's been done yet, but that would be wonderful to have done. And certainly after the State of the State address, I looked at every school district to see how much money every district is receiving in additional mental health support. And we're at, I believe it's right around 89,000 that Wauwatosa is receiving. So I don't know where that's reflected in here, if it has been, but certainly I encourage you to take a look at this. But the Saturday meeting was phenomenal. It really was. And I appreciate not only the other meeting I went to, but the Saturday I went to. Dr. Means, I feel you listened to the community. The community agrees with you. It's a mess. We have a mess. You've inherited a mess. And you are trying to fix and right the ship that's been adrift at sea for way too long in Wauwatosa.
Any other public comment from in the room? All right, we will close public comment for in the room. Looks like we have a number of people online. Jamie?
Yes, first up, Maggie Barrion. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address. Maggie Barrion, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address. You are muted. You will need to unmute.
No comment, sorry.
Okay. Next is Jennifer and Eric Udver. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address. You are muted. Jennifer and Eric Udver, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Sorry, no comment.
Okay, if anyone in the room, the virtual room, does not have a comment, then please lower your hand so that I don't enable you. Jennifer Kraft, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi there, Jennifer Kraft, 8818 Ravenswood Circle. I like the pieces of this plan that I'm hearing where the money stays close to learning in a classroom. I can assure you no teacher has ever said, oh, I'm so glad they hired a new director at central office. I definitely can see the rationale for having a couple more hands on deck, a couple more interventionists, a couple more behavioral specialists who can, again, be in the moment with a student, helping a teacher day in and day out, and not directing anything or specializing in anything in an office off-site. So I think the board needs to be mindful of that, keeping the money as close to the student and student learning, and having very clear-cut objectives and metrics prior to any extension of the monies for future budgets. I do not want to see the district get into a pickle where they are on the hook for all of these expenditures with no rationale for continuing to spend as long as the Esser funds end up drying up. I am confused, and I generally keep on top of things, but I want to just alert someone. It never was even on my plate that there was a survey where we were supposed to click and drag the items and rate them until last night. I looked back at emails from the 13th from the district, the 22nd, and even in the February, March newsletter. The only thing I got in any of those communications until last night, I had only something about a meeting interest form, and I had independently written the board on the 15th with my thoughts about the Esser funding. So I'm very confused about the communication and how the 124 people filled out a survey. It never came across my plate until last night, and unfortunately life got in the way, and I just saw it then today. So I just wanted to let someone know that. Thank you.
Okay, next we have somebody with the name of Jules. Jules, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Okay, I got a new computer here and still haven't been able to correct this. This is Julie Alexander. I live at 7224 West State Street, Unit 1A in Wauwatosa. I did attend one of the listening sessions that Dr. Means had, and I'm looking at the plan that's presented as of today. I'm very pleased with the plan. I do see that Dr. Means did make some changes as a result of our listening sessions, especially in relation to the special ed students in the program. And when you look at the curriculum audit, basically students from 2018 through now who have disabilities have had some learning deficits, as well as the gifted students. So I really appreciate those being addressed. I also am happy with some of the other things in the plans. I remember looking at the seclusion and restraint information earlier this year, or that was last year. Basically, some of these new positions might have another hand in terms of helping individuals and teachers that are dealing with that situation deal with families and family engagement, to help with those incidents not being as pressing for next year's or the 2022 data, et cetera here. So I applaud that as well here. And really am looking forward to seeing on the agenda in the future the results of the audit that was just completed, as well as I'd also like to see how the Esser funds are being spent, like that chart that was referred to earlier here. And just hope that we can all continue to work together for our students here. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Okay, I would ask when virtual guests are done speaking, could you please lower your hands in the application? Next is Todd Dahlgren. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Todd Dahlgren, 1647 North 122nd Street. I'd like to start off and say that a lot of our schools are in a near crisis state. I will use Whitman Middle School as an example, where approximately 4 dozen fights have occurred this year. Staff have been subjected to physical violence themselves in a few cases. My daughter is enrolled there, and one day earlier this year, in a 1-hour period for science class, she received 6 minutes of instruction due to misbehavior of just a handful of classmates that the teacher had to continually deal with. Thank you to Dr. Means for talking with staff to get their insight as to where resources are needed. This plan reflects that, and I would trust Dr. Means to put metrics in place to get an indication of return on investment for this within the next 2 years, and then reassess priorities. Again, please vote yes for this plan. Thank you.
Okay, next is Emily Peters. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Yes, Emily Peters, 2525 North 82nd Street. And I did attend one of the listening sessions, and I would agree that they were lively. And I really want to thank Dr. Means for listening. I think he has really taken into account what people said in those meetings and changed the plan to accommodate some of the things that the public really would like to see happen in the school district. I also would agree that, in the past, there has not been enough listening, particularly by most of the members of this board, as to what the public needs. And again, I thank Dr. Means for actually doing that and listening. I want to bring up a couple of things. Number one, I want to acknowledge the changes that were made in additions of potential special ed staffing I do think that that is very important as our special ed students have really suffered during the pandemic and have probably seen some of the biggest deficits in terms of their learning. I would like to maybe inquire a little bit about in the special ed, there was a request for maybe adding, excuse me, adding additional funding for the expansion of the summer classes for 18 to 21 year old group. And I didn't see that in the plan, and maybe that's what some of this staffing is for. I'm not sure. So maybe that could be clarified. And then very lastly, I'd like to be able to understand what the results of the special ed audit were. I don't know. I don't believe it's on tonight's agenda, but I think that that needs to be addressed rather quickly. But once again, to reiterate, thank you, Dr. Means, for listening and making accommodations for what the public has really been wanting for a long time. Thank you.
Okay, next is Kendra Kovar. Kendra, it's saying you have an older version of Zoom, and in order for you to speak, we need to promote you to panelist, which means your video will be viewable to the public. So I'm going to move to the next person. And if you want that to happen, please leave your hand raised. Danielle Long. Danielle Long, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Thank you. This is Danielle Long, 2622 North Menominee River Parkway. I really want to reiterate what Deb Pollack, Todd Dahlgren, and Emily Peters all said. I was in one of the Esser sessions with them. I really, really want to thank Dr. Means for finally listening to us. He's been listening to us since day one, and it's nice to finally feel like we're being heard. I think teachers and parents feel like they have not been heard for a really long time. So yes, we do have hope. And we are in a really bad place as a district. And honestly, I feel like everyone but the board is acknowledging that. You see the enrollment that is down. You see the number of teachers and administrators who are leaving. You have these numbers, and this tells you something. Neither of my children at their schools have permanent principals right now. That's not very reassuring to me. As Todd said at Whitman, we've now seen over 50 fights. My daughter is used to going to school with violence. That's not acceptable to me. We got to this point because we were so focused on other priorities that we weren't focusing on these issues. New program after new program after new program that is tried every year and then tossed aside for the next program. It's throwing good money after bad. And these are new innovations that the teachers are asking for, that parents are asking for. And with all due respect, you brought on Dr. Means. I'm asking that you hear him because he's hearing us. So I'm asking you to vote on this. I understand. I asked the question about sustainability. I get that. But I do hope that we will see other initiatives or positions be able to be eliminated as a result of the successes that we find here. Dr. Means referred to it as an incubator. I think that we need to start doing something different because things aren't working. And as he said, parents are talking about leaving. We talk about this all the time. We've got 4 years left to get our youngest through, and we have to outweigh staying here or uprooting our children at a very crucial time. And that's a terrible decision for a parent to have to make. So please vote yes on this. Thank you.
Okay, Kendra Kovar, you're in as a panelist. If you want to speak, please state your name and address.
Hi, Kendra Kovar. I'm a teacher at Whitman Middle School. My address is 2405 Merlin Way. I would just like to thank Dr. Means for actually listening to the teachers. I've spent 15 of my 30 plus years in TOSA, and for the first time, I feel like I've actually been listened to more in the last 6 months than I have for the 14 and a half other years that I've been in the district. But not only has he listened to the teachers, but his plan indicates that he's actually responding to what he heard from the teachers. I feel like he's really integrated what we've taken. He's readjusted the plan. He's allowed us to fill out the survey, reprioritize what's important. And I too agree with the plan. And thank you very much for hearing from the community and the teachers. We appreciate it.
Okay. Next is Alicia Bartz. Alicia Bartz, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address. Alicia Bartz. Oh.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the plan and I appreciate all of the ways that you've iterated on it through the sessions that you had. I did just want to amplify and champion some teacher feedback from the Monday Esser session that I was at that isn't reflected in the plan. It's very similar to the feedback that Leanne was talking about earlier tonight. This particular staff member said that in addition to funding new adults in our buildings, we should look at the programs that are working and that have potential and look at how we can double down on those programs and the teachers that are working on those programs for free during their prep periods. Advisory and Link Crew were examples of programs that could be used in this fashion, working on training more people for Link Crew, looking at retooling the curriculum, giving people stipends for working on these programs. And so if you can't, incorporate that into the Esser plan at this date, I'd like you to really look at opportunities to double down on programs that have potential and that are working, rather than, as Danielle just said, constantly introducing new programs. Let's look at what's working and give those teachers that are working on those things the funds and tools that they need to succeed. I think those are some really excellent opportunities that meet a lot of your criteria for social, for, connecting with kids, and the types of things that you're trying to do with this plan. So I encourage you to look at what's working and what teachers are giving in their prep periods to make those kinds of things work as well. Thank you.
And there are no more hands raised.
Thank you, Jamie. That'll close public comment on the Esser funds. I'll go back to the board if you have any final comments before we vote. Mr. Rowan.
Thank you. I guess to that comment and to going into some of the one-time purchases, can you just restate the rationale for the work truck and for the emergency radios? Is that just because those are just so towards the end of their life that they just must be replaced? Okay.
So the radio, let me state it a different way. The work truck definitely is at the end of his life cycle.
Okay.
And when you look at the capacity of the needs of that B&G team, they need another work truck. Okay. So that's the rationale there. With the radios, is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy, Sean. What's happening in our schools is if Mr. Means is a fourth grade teacher who has a disruptive student, instead of using the phone in the classroom, that's hard, right? Because if Mr. Doman's my principal and I have a disruptive student, I need to be able to reach Mr. Doman, Principal Doman, right away. So what we've gone to is a system where the teacher has a radio so they can reach the principal immediately. Because some people will say, well, don't we have classroom telephones? Can't they call the office? Principals are mobile. They're not always in their office. That radio creates an instant connection between I have an emergency in my classroom or I have an emergency on the playground into an adult who can immediately help. And I think if anything, the fact that when we put out the call to our principals, that there was a need for 55 of them across the district, I think just shares and shows and gives an insight on how much there's a need for us to really try to drill down and help specific issues.
And if I may, not to say that's wrong or anything, is it, because I would imagine every teacher also has a phone that they carry around with them, right? So we would just be asking.
A cell phone?
Yeah. So I guess I just asked the question, if every teacher already has a phone that they could pick up from, right? If it was from a teacher to a principal, wouldn't they know to pick up their phone, or do you think? I guess I'm just asking because
Mr. Roland?
Yes, go ahead.
From a technology standpoint, that's just not going to work because we have many cell phone dead spots. in the district. The walkie-talkies and the radios that we have work on a dedicated frequency, and we have per the city mandates amplification systems throughout the buildings. So walkie-talkies are totally more reliable than cell phone coverage.
They're fairly sophisticated devices. So if a teacher from McKinley came to Fisher for a meeting, they can still stay on their frequency, Sean, and we can that community in McKinley can communicate with that principal or that staff member while they're at another location. It's really, it's good technology. And as Mr. Price stated, the fact that we have a lot of dead spots for our cell phones in multiple buildings is something to keep in mind as well.
Okay. Then my last question, I guess, is not for necessarily anybody. I didn't get the email at 4:52, so I don't know if there was like a price tag associated with that, but I'd be curious to know what the price tag is. If we can't cover it with these dollars, I'd be curious to know what is the price tag for that, and is there a way to pay for it with other dollars? But without knowing what the price tag of that is, it's difficult for me to.
And what I've been sharing, Sean, because I vividly remember that statement from that was the first listening session at Ease.
Okay.
The $30,000 obviously can go towards some of that work, but obviously we're going to have to, and I think we heard it from one of our community members in the room, that investing in our social emotional learning curriculum has to be up. I mean, all our curriculum needs to be updated, but that curriculum needs to be updated. Reinvesting in Link Crew and investing in our advisory program. Those are all things that we're going to have to just invest in with our permanent ongoing budget anyway. And if we really, from my perspective, we can't continue to say we believe in social emotional learning and mental health and then not put our permanent budget behind it. Mm-hmm. So the $30,000 is a kickstart, is an incubator, but I'm hoping that there will be staff members who will push us to say, no, here's a great new advisory curriculum, and this is what we need to finance. And that should be embedded in our general budget.
Just to add to the radio discussion, I've used radios in a warehouse environment. They're much faster than cell phones. You get immediate voice off to the next person. So just to reassure you, they're better for this purpose.
So I wanted to ask the question, because this is the first time the radios have been, I think, on our agenda. So just want to push on every little thing that feels soft.
Your job.
Just be fun.
Thank you. I'm going to help Dr. Means out here. This is a recommendation coming from the Safety and Security, the Safety and Security Committee. It is going to be helping us with our crisis and safety and security plans moving forward. So second topic is the recruiting of the new positions. Certainly I support the plan. My questions earlier were really to understand from the administration's perspective, how ready are we and how passionate are we to sustain this beyond the initial Esser funds? And from what I'm hearing tonight, the community is supportive, the educators are supportive, the vast majority of community comment is supportive, but the job descriptions of these individuals, and I think we talked about this last meeting, it's a big job description if we want them to do the things we are asking. And I'm wondering about our readiness to hire for these individuals from a human resources perspective, because certainly we want the biggest impact in going to the students and the staff who we can impact in a very immediate way. So is that doable? Can we hire for these special people in the time frame we need?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other board comments or questions?
And I don't want, Sharon, your question, I don't want to just say yes and move on. We're confident that if you are so inclined and say yes to this plan, I think it sends a message to our staff that support is coming, but it also sends a message to prospective candidates that we value. We have certain values that we want to articulate and support in the district. And that helps with recruitment. When people ask the question, where did this come from? We will be able to say, Ms. Foch and I will be able to say, it came from our parents. It came from our staff members who said they want these positions. And this is our attempt to meet the needs of our students, our staff, and our community. That's helpful. That's a better sales pitch than a lot of different things, but I think there's another agenda item that may help as well.
Ms. Fraley.
That's what I was just going to say. The timing of this, I have had a couple people from outside the district and other districts say like, wow, like TOSA's doing a lot of hiring. What's going on? Or, I see how are you spending your Esser money? And I said, it's coming up. And we started talking about it on the 14th. And what was killing me was biting my tongue being like, and we want to be able to do bigger, better things for our teachers too. So the timing of the hiring of the district level positions, these additions, which are boots on the ground, helping schools, teachers in schools, and a new comp package, I think actually positions us in a really strategic way to make the big investment, which, when Dr. Means came in, I feel like we gave him a couple of things. We said, get underneath these things. And we said, help us go to the next level academically, help us respond to the challenges that COVID has brought about in terms of academic recovery, social, emotional. I feel like he's ticking these things off, but I particularly appreciate you bringing out the compensation plan a little bit earlier, maybe, so that we could have it all right around the same time, because I think it sends a strong message that while to the community's point, we do have work to do. Like, there's no denying that. We have a plan. Thank you to Dr. Means uncovering a bunch of things and figuring out what success can look like with a new structure. So.
Thank you, Dr. Means, and thank you to the community. Thank you to the teachers. I remember one of the things that we've talked about a lot is how do we utilize the talent, the perspectives of those closest to the classroom. And I'm excited about, one of the speakers brought up investing in places that are going to have high touch impact on students. And Dr. Means, when you talk through kind of what this would look like and what these interventions were, I thought you put a great bow on, here's why we would invest in these specific things. And so I'm excited. So if our goal is to be a destination district, the focusing on being excellent for all the students that we serve in the environment and that we exist, and that we want to be a great place for every kid and all families, that we need to be a great place for teachers to do great work. And I'm feeling confident that these interventions, these resources will help us move us closer there. Thank you for this work. I think one of the things that I'm thinking back to is this idea of how do we re-engage the community in the schools? How do we create the sense of culture across all the schools? I was at Roosevelt quite a bit this weekend where the PTA jumped right in, and I think it was 1 degree outside and it was a ninja course, and I want to guess 120 people with kids and families wanting to come together. So I think the community is ready to find ways, whether it's through Esser feedback sessions or community engagement or volunteering in classrooms. I think folks are ready to do this lift as a community together.
I did fail in one area. Kate, Kate suggested at the last meeting that maybe we should use the Esser funds.
I caught that too. I was looking for it. It wasn't in there.
And just use all 4.2 million. Remove the asbestos on the third floor.
I must talk about that with someone like once a day.
Yes, ma'am. So I apologize.
It's okay.
I talked to our director of buildings and grounds, and it would have exceeded the 4.2 million.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you investigated. But
yes, we did investigate. I mean, it's true. If you haven't been on the third floor, it is a beautiful learning environment. It's just, it will take a lot of funds but truly, it was not a throwaway. I appreciate your feedback, and we did discuss it, and we did look into it. It would have been
good to know.
Excessive.
Yeah, I believe that.
Thank you. I will just say I really appreciate all the comments tonight. And what really struck me was the comment from Ms. Hogue about our social emotional learning and how we need to tie that into our long-term plan. And I'm happy to hear Dr. Means that will be part of it. That's going to be important work for us to do as we go forward beyond these 2 years for sure. So if there are no final comments, we will move to a vote. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Neufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. Thank you. We will move on to approval of the 2022-23 school year calendar. Dr. Jessup Banger.
It is recommended that the school board approve the 2022-23 school year calendar, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I've reviewed this at a prior meeting. Are there any other board comments or questions around the calendar? Seeing none, we will go to community comment on approval of the 2022-23 school year calendar. We'll start with those in the room. If you want to speak, please come to the mic. If you're online, please raise your hand. Jamie, do we have anyone online?
Yeah, Catherine Wilkes.
All right, we'll close
You have
comment.
the microphone.
Online.
Catherine Wilkes, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Katie Wilkes, 1236 Woodside Street. I am a teacher at Underwood. I just noticed that October 31st is not outlined in a square as an in-service day. It is listed in the middle, but we might want to square that out so that parents see that that's an in-service day.
Thank you. Thank you for that note.
There are no more hands raised.
All right. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Neufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. We'll move on to approval of mitigation protocol in alignment with policy 8450. And we kind of have two items around this issue of our mitigation. We'll start with this one, Mr. Phillips.
Sure. It is recommended that the school board approve mitigation protocols to be in alignment with policy 8450, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Means, did you want to talk us through this and then potentially even how the second item will play into it?
Yes. So the board does have a policy 8450 that allows the district administrative team, our school nursing team, and others to work in collaboration with the public health office at the city of Wauwatosa to manage and to truly develop a plan for issues like COVID-19. When you look at the second paragraph of policy 8450, there's an in part where it says in others designated by the Wisconsin Department of Public Health. COVID-19 would fall under that others. I think the reality of it is that in March of 2020, we all saw something that was unprecedented, that we had never seen. In some cases, we could say we haven't seen ever. Others could say from a disease standpoint, we've seen every 100 years or so. And most school boards moved into action because of the unprecedented challenge that COVID-19 presented. I believe we're at a point where we can pivot and manage this issue now, this disease, through 8450. I hope I've demonstrated to you that I communicate with you and I communicate with the board, or excuse me, the community. And so whatever challenges and plans we put in place, it would be something that would ultimately still come to the board for information along with the community. But we've been treating COVID-19 outside of this policy right now. It's been treated differently, understandably so. But it's the recommendation with this item to now align our ongoing mitigation strategy with policy 8450.
Thank you, Dr. Means. And Dr. Means and I have been talking about this for a couple of months now about when the right time is to bring this forward. And I think the time is right now. So I appreciate you preparing your staff and having everyone ready to kind of take this on and to take this this work on for us. Board comments or questions for Dr. Means as we move forward with this? So just to frame it up, this would shift to that policy moving forward. Mr. Martin.
So, Dr. Means, it kind of goes without saying, but I'll say it. If extraordinary public health events happen, the board can call a meeting. If circumstances don't fit the policy anymore, which is what we did a couple of years ago. So we aren't disabling ourselves in any way with doing this. We're just creating a regular order to follow. Is that correct?
You are.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think the other thing so somebody could make the argument, this is not at my advantage, but what this policy is, it's asking, what you're asking of me is to hold me accountable for the mitigation strategies. Right now, the board has been held in that role, and you've been thrust in that public square of what are the mitigation strategies. From a policy standpoint, and this policy is common language in most school districts, it should rest with, we have an amazing nurse team, and I would obviously communicate and collaborate with our nurse team, and we have a very good working relationship with the city of Wauwatosa. And we do that with any other disease. And so that would be the structure, and ultimately you would have to hold me accountable for making sure that the plan is safe and is clear, and it's something that everyone understands moving forward.
Yeah, and just to add on, Mr. Meyer, to what you're saying, which I agree, is I think what this makes us is more nimble, right? That we don't have to wait every 2 weeks and the board come before. And this is something I think that has been in all of our minds for a while. So this allows Dr. Means and his staff to really help us to be nimble and to adjust much more quickly than a school board can with a meeting cadence. So let's move on.
Thank you. So effectively, this will roll our current plan into this policy that we have for COVID-19.
It would align the work of who is ultimately responsible for enacting that plan into policy 8450. What I mean by that is, it's hard to believe, but think about when we were downstairs in the gym in August. It feels like it was a long time ago. But we set up this environment, not only in Wauwatosa, but all across the country, where school boards became the arbiter of deciding what the plan was going to be. 8450 states that should rest with staff. And then staff should communicate to the board and to obviously community and parents and staff, here's the plan, and this is how we're moving forward. It's a different structure than what we've been doing since we became aware of COVID-19.
Okay, so let me have a follow-up question. So I was told that some of my comments they weren't sure. Some community members weren't sure what point I was trying to make in our last conversation on this. And this is exactly the point I was trying to make, is that COVID now is not a separate
holiday. Because January 1st is the...
Jamie?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't Somebody wasn't muted.
All right. Sorry, Ms. Buford.
Okay, so thank you. So that was exactly my point, and we talked about, what was included as a communicable disease. And so what I just want to be clear is that right now we're saying we won't have a separate COVID-19 plan with the levels as we have been if the two items on the agenda tonight, including this one, pass.
I'll just chime in and say, yes, you're correct.
Okay.
But this would give Dr. Means, if he wanted to develop a plan and thoughts and things like that to his point, then we would hold him accountable to say, is that a good plan? Do we agree with it? All those types of things. But he would be able to do that without us meeting every 2 weeks to talk about masks and
if there's
all
a
those
new
types of
variant,
things.
yes, if there's a new variant that's similar to Omicron that emerges in November of 2022, what 8450 states is that I would work with our nursing team and the public health team at the city of Wauwatosa to come up with a plan and communicate it to the board and the community. Where right now our model is one in which the board has to approve that plan. That's the difference. So it removes the board from being in the role of having to approve a plan versus being updated and evaluating the efficiency of staff in implementing the plan.
Mr. Mike.
I think these two actions together, this one and the next one, clearly take the board out of managing health activity in the district and returns us back to our policy board paradigm. Under an extraordinary global emergency, we got into it because it required extraordinary measures that did need board approval, but we're going back to normal insofar as there is a normal. It's our new normal, and Dr. Means has to manage it. How does that sound? Does that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Okay.
Well framed. Ms. Buford.
Yes, thank you. So the difference, though, is that this pandemic caused us to change our instructional models, which is rightly so then should be a board decision. But now we're back to this policy. So I support this change. I just wanted to make sure that we all knew what exactly was happening. So, have some specific conversations around this. So, again, because I just received some questions on, well, what did that mean in our last discussion? So,
no, you're raising a very excellent point of in March of 2020, the board was thrust into a difficult position because the instructional model changed. That's fair. I think once we returned, and I think anytime we find ourselves in that position, the board will be in a position to either approve or deny a plan from administration. This 8450 simply says the management of keeping students safe from a disease should rest with the staff. And I think what we've been doing, and I think you've done an excellent job. It's been a pleasure to work with you and collaborate with you. But you've been put in a position of having to be part of the management process of COVID-19, and that's hard. That's difficult, especially when when I meet twice a week or twice a month with the public health officials of Milwaukee County, and they say they're fooling themselves if they think that they can predict what's happening with this disease every 2 weeks. They're in a state of trying to figure out what's happening every 2 weeks. So to put a governance board in the middle of this is really, I would use it's borderline unfair to you to assume that you are that you could act that quickly. The 8450 simply states that we will put this in the hands of staff, but that does not remove your role of evaluating the effectiveness of that plan. I want to be very clear about that as well. So the board still, it may not put you in the immediate role of passing plans, but you're still evaluating the effectiveness of it.
Thank you. Sounds like we have general support for this, but I'll move us to community comment on this item. If anyone in the room would like to speak on this topic around mitigation protocol in alignment with policy 8450, please come forward. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We'll get to you. Seeing none in the room, we'll close public comment in the room. Jamie, is there anyone online?
Yes, Mary Jo Randall, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Mary Jo Randall, 727 North 59th Street. You guys are making this a lot harder than it needs to be. You have a policy. You're simply agreeing now that you're going to follow your policy. And I don't know why it's a question, and it's something you need to be aware of in all of your board actions, that there are policies that guide this. So thank you.
Okay, next is, forgive the pronunciation, Brooklyn Moda. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Mady, and I am on 2648 North 114th Street. My concern about making this not a board issue, while I know that you guys have a lot on your plates at all the time, is that how our parents and community is going to be involved. As a personal anecdote, my son is immune and airway compromised, and today was his first day back since Christmas, because cases were so bad. And without masking, we probably wouldn't be able to safely send him to protect him. So I want to know that my voice and other parents' voices, or, teachers who are, being bombarded with viruses, especially when it's, little kids, that their voices are still going to be heard, even though it might not be brought up to the board as much as possible, if that makes sense. And I know that the nurses are doing an amazing, fantastic job, because we are in connection with a lot of them. I just want to make sure that there's clarity that the community is still going to have a voice when it comes to mitigation procedures. Thank you.
Okay, next is Kristen Bridges. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hello, Kristen Bridges, 1218 West Silver Spring Drive. I'm listening to all of these proposed changes. They seem a little bit like distinction without difference, which makes me curious about what's going to end up happening, as Dr. Means mentioned, if there is a new variant, if we go back to considering cases, things like that. The really important thing that I think we all need to be using for our compass right now is that tonight we have a chance to correct a lot of harm that's been done. We have a chance to eliminate protocols that we 2 years ago thought may have been helpful, but now we know that they're not only helpful, they've been harmful. We've had lots of comments in the past, conversations, especially with myself, about the effects of long-term and incorrect mask wearing, everything from CO2 headaches to nausea to breathing in bacteria causing other respiratory infections, everything to COVID being a small particle virus and the size that masks can filter, and that it just mathematically is not effective, that we have disregarded every single mask wearing safety protocol that exists, as outlined by the WHO, by OSHA. I don't really think it's as important for me to go on about that, because it seems as though that's information you already know and have. But I think what's really frustrating is that for months, the public, and myself included, have been coming forward trying to present this information, pleading to be heard, and have kind of essentially been dismissed and haven't really had a place in this decision-making process. But we're now seeing, like you're saying, that this pivot is well-timed and necessary, but I'm also hearing that we're leaving the door open to put this back into place if things change, and that's dangerous. So I would say, I see that my time's coming to a close, that I would say to Dr. Means and the board that what we need is to please be brave, please look for real answers, please vote in a way that's going to protect the people and put forward that plan that Dr. Means said should be safe and clear and understandable, because I don't think the one that's been in place is, but we have a chance tonight to make it so. Thank you.
We have no more hands raised.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Any other board comments on this item before we move to a vote? I would just address the one public comment about would the public still have a voice? And I'd say you'd still have a voice in any, just like any other topic that you'd have. I think you have 7 board members you can always reach out to and advocate for your position. We have public speaking at all of our meetings or non-agenda items. So even if it wasn't on the agenda, you'd be able to speak. So rest assured there are still avenues for people to have their voice heard. There's no other comments. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes. We'll move on to the next superintendent action item. Mr. Meyer.
It is recommended that the school board approve suspending all mitigation levels and shifting to mask optional for the entire district, JK to 12th grade and recreation department, effective immediately, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I think several board members have asked us to put this on the agenda for this evening, and I appreciate that. Definitely seems to go in line with our previous vote. I don't know, Dr. Means, if you have anything to add. It's fairly straightforward. It's self-explanatory, but I think it does give you some view as far as where the board stands currently.
I think it will provide a good guidance and a North Star for my ability to implement 8450 appropriately. I think it also falls into line with the most recent guidance from the CDC and from the Department of Health Services at the state level. It's, everyone's moving toward this proposal that you have in front of you this evening. I would just be remiss because I do truly enjoy dialogue with people. And one of the things that has emerged is that we can't forget that masks have had an impact. I think Sharon mentioned this. It's had an impact on the instructional flow for children. And so this vote this evening isn't just about masks. In a way, it will also have an impact on the instructional environment. We are in Milwaukee County, based on the new changes with the CDC, we are squarely within a safe environment to go mask optional. Mask optional does not mean that families who choose to wear masks can continue to wear a mask. It's within their purview to do so. And they are more than welcome to do it. In preparation for this vote, I actually reached out to colleagues who are leading school districts that are currently that have been mask optional all year, just to get a sense of, so how many students wear masks and how many of your staff wear masks? And the two individuals I've talked to said it's about 25% of the students continue to wear masks, about 50% of the staff continue to wear masks, and that because I know I've had community members say, let's compare our infection rates to these school districts. So I've gathered individual school district rates, and they have hovered around 2 to 3% infection rates across their district, which would land us in a level 3. So those districts that are mask optional, they would have, using our current metrics, they would have been in a level 3 anyway. I would urge the board to move forward. I think we've received a lot of good guidance from both the CDC and the Department of Health Services recently.
Thank you, Dr. Means. Any board comments, questions? Dr. Chispane.
So, Mr. Doman, thank you for putting this on the agenda. I support this. And I'm looking forward to making this move. I know that there's families who are concerned. And I hear their concerns. And I think whatever we can do to make sure to support students who choose to want to wear masks, that they can do so in a way that's comfortable. But I think this is a good time, and coupled with the earlier decision by the board, I think these two work, and I trust Dr. Means will lead us from here.
Thank you. Mr. Mark.
The things that created the tipping point for me on this, and as you know, I've been extraordinarily cautious, having seen relatives my age at their deathbeds in their 50s because of childhood illnesses before they were 5. Currently we have vaccines available, and for the age groups where the vaccines are not approved yet, the kindergartners, global class epidemiologists are saying that Omicron is so transmissible that a kindergartner is not capable of wearing a mask well enough to stop the transmission of Omicron. So there's no utility anymore with the masks for the kindergartners with respect to Omicron, and everyone else has a vaccine available. So that is the reason why I will support this tonight.
Any other board comments or move on to public comments? Seeing none, we will start with those in the room. Anyone like to comment on this agenda item, please come forward, state your name and address. You have 3 minutes, and then we'll go to folks online. So please raise your hand if you're online and would like to speak. I'm seeing no one in the room. Jamie, if you want to go to online, we'll close public comment for in-person.
Brooklyn Mady, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi, thank you again for sticking along with me. Brooklyn Mady, 2648 North 114th Street. First and foremost, got to appreciate everything that you guys have been doing. I feel like the reason we were able to send our children to school this year is because you guys did create a really safe learning environment. You're pushing vaccines, you're doing vaccine clinics, you're educating people, and that's been fantastic. And I understand where this decision is coming from. We're seeing cases get lower and lower, which is amazing. My concern again is for the younger grades, or I should say younger ages, I'm sorry, that aren't able to get the vaccine just quite yet, because there is evidence that masks are worn appropriately, as I'm actually a sub, and they are. And they can be worn appropriately, especially with the proper material that children can have K95 masks, and they do. So I do think they do work. And so I'm a little concerned about making it optional for children that have learned that masking is okay, appropriate, and safe and respectful, especially for children that are disabled and immune compromised, and that we are still a couple months out from them being able to get a vaccine. So why not just finish up the school year with masks? Because frankly, the risk is there still. And I don't think it's fair to just automatically push all these families aside that access special needs services and therapy and say, sorry, but your health doesn't matter anymore because we're not comfortable wearing masks. And essentially, like, am I going to have to pull my child out of school because he's disabled and now we're not going to masks and he still can't get a vaccine for a couple more months? I mean, it is a serious issue that I think that really would you consider to not make masks optional for, I think it's JK and Tosa Tots too. We really need to take that into account.
Okay, Jennifer Kraft, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi there.
Sorry, Jennifer, I muted the wrong person. You can talk now.
Oh, okay. Hi, Jennifer Kraft, 8818 Ravenswood Circle. Obviously, I 100% support suspending all these mitigation efforts and levels. As earlier you mentioned, Mr. Doman mentioned that the board has listened and there's always opportunity for speaking. I think this can serve as an instructional moment for the board because since at least August of 2021, you have heard loud and clear from the public our plea that you re-examine your policy specifically on masking. And, you know, we are told that you are listening, yet we've had no public statement that has shown any regret from the board when neighboring districts have been doing things differently and successfully. The board continued and forged ahead. And so I'm hoping that if nothing more, this is an instructional moment for the Wauwatosa School District Board that yes, you are listening, but I don't necessarily know if you are hearing. And moving forward on big issues like this, where you're hearing from both sides, perhaps you can be more reflective and moving forward, maybe, you know, be willing to be a little bit more open-minded. Because, you know, here we are, March 1st tomorrow, and poof, just like that, you know, COVID's over. So I'm happy that you're moving forward with this, and I hope you forge ahead and never go back. But I really hope that's a really reflective moment for the board for all big issues moving forward, big and small. Thank you.
Next is Catherine Turley. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Turley. My address is 2551 North 66th Street. I'm also a teacher in the district. I just want to respond to a previous caller with a child with special needs. I understand your worry and concern. Your child, of course, may continue to wear a mask to protect themselves. However, it's critical that we understand the impairment we've caused children in their speech and language development by wearing masks for such a big portion of their young lives. The lag that we're seeing between students that can and students that cannot in our school district has never been bigger. And it's an incredible challenge to teachers to meet the needs of all students, as has been stated earlier this evening. So I do hope that the board votes to end the mask mandate. Students and families who prefer to continue to use masks, of course, are welcome and encouraged to do so. And for myself personally, being masked, being double vaccinated and boosted, and having COVID twice, the masking didn't do much to help me. And I'm not concerned about my own health. I'm concerned about the long-term learning of our students in Wauwatosa. Thank you.
Michelle Hughes, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Michelle Hughes, 2001 North 119th Street. I'd like to encourage you to vote yes to this plan. It's time to move on from COVID. There are more important issues the board needs to tackle. The board can no longer hide behind COVID. It's time to get to work and make this school district great again for every student. But in addition to the masks, I also want you to take a long look at the layered mitigation that is also harming our children. For example, my son still sits in his classroom and eats lunch with Netflix on. So those are missed opportunities to be socializing in a cafeteria setting, to be able to pick your seat and sit by a classmate. My son's in 5th grade, so maybe the opportunity to sit by a classmate in another 5th grade class, to bring back field trips, bring back fun to school, bring back the things that our kids need to start to practice socializing, practice hanging out with friends, practice navigating conflicts and how do we resolve conflicts. My son will go to middle school next year, where I've heard from the Whitman parents, there's been over 50 fights. My son needs to have an opportunity, a simple opportunity to eat his bagged lunch in the cafeteria before the school year is out, to practice some of these social skills, to improve upon some friendships, and to get back to normal. Thank you.
Okay, Brooklyn Meady, did you want to speak again? I noticed you raised your hand again.
Yes, I just want to thank you. Just to go back to, people said that like my child still could wear a mask. He can't. He's disabled. He has one ear. Even with a ribbon behind, he also is autistic, nonverbal, and has airway issues. So he can't wear a mask. And so we rely on 3 and 4-year-olds, because that's what the kind of kids that he's around that age, to wear masks for them, and the teachers too. And that's, I mean, for somebody to say like, oh, he can still wear a mask, like unless you've seen your child fighting for their life at Children's multiple times, I would really think that you need to have a little bit of empathy. My child has not been able to go out in public since he was born, except for this year with masking mitigations. It's not fair to dismiss disabled people's views simply because other people are uncomfortable. Thank you.
We have no more hands raised.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. So that closes public comment on this. Any other board comments? Ms. Britt.
Just a question, Dr. Means, if you want to speak to the question around field trips, other mitigation strategies, is that something that can be communicated to schools and families in the near future?
Yes, and I think it's mainly internal conversation, but we'll make sure that it's communicated to all, that we want to encourage gatherings and opportunity to celebrate within community. I think many of our staff members have felt uneasy about those things. I know we had some challenges around the winter break time to see if we were going to have winter concerts. And that was before Omicron, right? So we were at a mitigation level where we could have. I think people have just been in such a difficult space where they haven't been able to think this way. So I really appreciate your question, because this should be a moment for us to pivot to a new chapter. And that's a chapter of re-engaging with one another and being in community with one another, and encouraging field trips. And on a school bus, according to the CDC, you don't have to wear a mask. And that, I know that many of our elementary principals have called and said, are we able to bring together 2 different classrooms? Because there's a lot of instructional value in bringing classes together. So all of those things, if your vote is in the affirmative this evening, we can start moving forward in a new direction with all of those different opportunities.
I guess I just want to make sure that because of the timing of this vote and depending on what happens, that schools are not inundated tomorrow with this should happen, that should happen. This is how the board voted. So for tonight, I just want to clarify, just so that tomorrow schools are not being asked to respond to things beyond masking, which I think are fair requests. I just want to make sure that our communication, whatever it is very clear as to what begins tomorrow, just so that principals are not spending their whole day reacting and responding.
I'm sorry. Ms. Petita has a communication prepared if your vote is in the affirmative that would actually go out this evening.
Okay.
She indicated, and that there will be more information that will come out within 24 hours from your vote. Yeah. But there would be something that I think Sarah has put in place that would go out just this evening yet, just to let people know what the next steps are.
That's helpful. I know the last time it didn't go out until the morning of, and there was some confusion with start of school. So
right.
Okay. Ms. Bufo.
And thank you. And just to the point that we should all be respectful of the choices that individuals do make. Should they want to mask, they are able to mask, and we should respect that.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. We will move on to business services reports, our monthly financial report. Dr. Means?
Yes, the monthly financial reports are available. I think the highlight that I would just point the board's attention to is that we have received our first installment of tax payment. So that's helpful to our general fund. When you look at how we're tracking compared to last year, we're tracking exactly where we were last year. So that's also a good sign. We've expended about 50% of our budget, and we're a little over half of the school year gone and past us. So I think from all indications, we're tracking appropriately, and the financial positive that we can speak to is that we have started to receive our first installment of tax payments.
Thank you, Dr. Means. Any board comments?
The only other thing is that I know that there was a question around, I think there was an expenditure of over $20,000 for Left's purchased, there was a payment that we paid.
Thank you.
Yes. So let me explain that publicly. Left's actually purchased Christmas trees that then the Wauwatosa East Athletic Department turned around and sold for their fundraiser. But Left's made the initial purchase. We paid back that business, and that's why there was an expenditure of that dollar amount.
This is why I would like annotation on some of those line items, because 23,000 to Left's Lucky Town, who would know it was Christmas trees, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Means.
And big thanks to Left's for supporting that.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to discussion of proposed 2022 capital projects. You're in the fishbowl.
All right, Greg Chwinski, Director of Buildings and Grounds. Here to discuss with you, give you a kind of an overview of referendum capital improvement projects. Give you a quick overview of the whole referendum, and then projects that we're proposing to complete for the 2022-2023 school year. There are several projects that we're planning for the 2021-22 school year that were not completed. It's not that we didn't complete any. We certainly completed a large list of projects. These are projects, and I'm going to get into listing them later here and talk to you about the projects, but the school board has been presented this list of projects previously. The most recent time, I guess, would have been December of 2020, where these projects were listed in a spreadsheet by my predecessor, Melissa Nedeshon, as original referendum projects, project list, and additional project list that fell underneath the referendum scope. So Why did they get delayed? I would say that shortly after that update, that presentation by Melissa, as you all know, was her resignation, which did create a most challenging time for us in transition and all of that kind of stuff. Early on, as our team worked towards trying to fulfill all of the projects that were supposed to be completed for 21-22, it was realized pretty quickly that some of them may not have been far enough along. And with the time constraints of where we were and the summer of 2021 approaching, it's considered to be a concern that there was not enough time to complete them all. Also, I will say that very early in 2021, January, February, still very much in the process of building McKinley and Wilson Elementary Schools. Was still 8 months of project to go and a considerable amount of contingency money tied up into those projects. And it was unknown at that time, as well as projects such as Eisenhower Elementary School HVAC upgrades, Longfellow HVAC that hadn't even been bid out yet and haven't even been completed to really know what kind of funding was remaining. So there was some uncertainty about the timing. There was some uncertainty about the funding. So these projects were put on hold. Now, we are finished with all of those projects, including the parking lot here, Madison parking lot, Roosevelt Elementary School site improvements. And as we've been working for the last couple of months here on factoring all the funding sources from all of the projects to date, factoring all of the costs to the projects to date, to get to a point where we know how much money is in fact remaining. So just to give the overview here of the funding sources that we're utilizing, I'll kind of explain these as we go. Obviously, the 2018 approved referendum for $124,900,000. Referendum interest earnings did come out at $4,843,000 about. Focus on energy rebates. So these would be rebates that we got with the projects from doing things like LED lighting with the projects, high efficiency boilers, mechanical systems that were high efficiency. So we received money back from Focus on Energy for those. So those were put back into the 49 account as a revenue in Fund 49. MMSD reimbursements, not all yet received. Some of them have been, but we will receive about $1,091,000 in MMSD reimbursements to offset the projects that have occurred to this point. The donation that is included in there is $750,000, and that donation was specifically for the Lincoln Outdoor Classroom, just to be specific on that, which was part of the new construction of Lincoln Elementary School. And then Fund 41 and Fund 10, just to kind of, an example here would be a project such as East High School site improvements. The parking lots, the sidewalks, everything that was done as far as that goes at East High School was considered referendum, but the field work was not considered as part of referendum. But the district, with the board's approval, did decide to put Fund 41 dollars into those projects. So they're noted here because they were part of the overall project that was completed. So we're at a total of $134,525,000 in funding sources to go towards the projects. So I won't go through all these step by step, and I did, so Lincoln and Underwood, McKinley and Wilson, obviously the new schools. We did a plethora of HVAC projects, secure entryways, furniture upgrades, room finishes, in other capital improvement projects, which we'll call capital improvement projects group number 1, CIP 2, CIP 3. A more detailed summary of these that I did present to you in September of last year. I did list the link here. It still exists for a more detailed list of what those projects were. So the total amounts there, and these are nearly, I would say, I don't want to say estimated. These are what the costs are. They are rounded. This is still very fluid. There are still a few invoices coming in, but we have factored in anything that is encumbered and what we should be expecting invoices for. So the locker room's also on there, as it was approved by this school board to utilize referendum interest dollars, I believe, to cover that. So that is also included on there. So our total anticipated cost of the projects to date is $130,304,000. Subtract that from the total funding, and we have about $4.2 million remaining. So I did want to just step back a little bit just to kind of go to what was presented to the community, what was presented to the school board as we did the whole process of the facilities advisory committee and, you know, them studying the 2015 study to come up with a project list and then make a recommendation to the school board. And then the school board obviously to put it, you know, make a decision to put it on the ballot. And this kind of gave that what was on the ballot, what community voted on, and gave that general scope of the referendum work. So these projects are as follows, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on all of them, but this is the project list that I believe for the most part, with the exception of maybe one, which I'll explain, has been presented to the school board prior to. I will note that the amounts here are different than what was presented to the school board in 2020, and that is based on my experience here in the last 14 months, what other projects have come in at, and actually getting actual budget numbers from construction management companies on certain projects. So the Washington site improvements was certainly something that was on the referendum scope. And it involved replacement of asphalt, deteriorating asphalt, concrete sidewalks. There's a lot of safety concerns. The play structures are well beyond life expectancy. They're in disrepair. The fences are failing. The overall aesthetics are poor. Similar to Roosevelt site improvement projects, the original amount that was budgeted for that one, if you recall, was far less than what was needed to address the significant needs. Washington site improvements would include a new layout of the space, replacement of asphalt, new play structures, and surfaces consistent with the new schools in Roosevelt's to have that ADA accessibility that we want going forward at all of our schools. ADA accessibility site-wide, Washington lacks that severely. New fencing, enhanced green spaces, creating areas of play as well as areas for outdoor classroom use. Enhanced landscape, creating the park-like feel, and a new marquee sign consistent with all other signs in the district. The art and fitness food service renovation, if you recall. So the reason that this one is coming up is because the tech ed space renovation as part of the referendum was done, and it took over a significant portion of the art space. So in order to do that, it had been planned to do a phase 2 of the project to take the existing weight room and turn that into the art studio, which would then be across from the art lab and art studio that there is currently, which was also made as part of the tech ed thing, but it's very small and was not designed to house the entire art space. So this would create an art wing. In order to do that, we have to move the weight room somewhere. So we move that to the fitness room and we expand that to the north and the south, taking over the serving area to create a wellness center. And then obviously we need to put the food service area somewhere different. So it was kind of a steamroll effect, I guess, of making the decision to renovate the tech ed space and utilize the space that we had. So the East High School generator project, this is one that you have seen before, and the board did approve the bid package on this project. This is an ongoing project, and I am bringing it up now because I would like to make a recommendation for the potential that the project may increase by about $50,000. The reason this is coming up is because as we have gone through this project with the East High School generator and studied the current electrical service and had We Energies out and all of that, it did come to our knowledge that we own the transformers that exist in the basement of East High School. We own them, we're responsible for them, we are responsible for maintaining them, and they are 50 plus years old. This would be the time to replace these now, as we will be putting in some new switch gears and stuff with this new generator. So I have laid out kind of the 3 options that there would be and the cost impacts for them. If we were to make a plan to replace these transformers on our own with district funds somewhere along the way, this would kind of be the cost impact. You'd have removal of existing, which that's consistent throughout all 3 options, just so you are aware. $50,000 to remove the existing, that's worst case scenario. Installation of new, currently right now, based on numbers that I received from an electric company as an estimate, $125,000 to $150,000 to replace the transformers. And then, as we should be doing, biannual maintenance on these transformers for about $5,000 every 2 years, which should be getting done to maintain. If we were to plan something and we didn't plan it in time and these transformers failed, this presents the next level of options. The same removal, $50,000, installation of new remains the same. Biannual maintenance would still remain the same. However, having to replace our own transformers in the event that they failed would mean that we would be down electricity for whatever lead time it would take to get new transformers. Obviously, we would not shut down school for 2 months, so we would have to bring in a series of generators and everything to keep the cost, to keep the electric going. I don't have an accurate cost on that, but I would say that, you know, if the transformers were down for 2 months and we were waiting on lead time on getting new transformers and lead time on getting them installed, we could be looking at $100,000 plus just to make sure that the school kept running. The option that I would recommend would have a cost increase that would increase the project $25,000 to $50,000. The removal of existing is still on there for $50,000. There is, so we can go from primary to secondary with We Energies. So what that means essentially is We Energies would place their own transformer on our site that they would be responsible for. They would be responsible for maintaining. They would be responsible for replacing if it ever did fail. They would have quicker access to such things that we would not be down for a period of time, but that would be their responsibility. And we would have a cost increase. We're looking at about $2,000 annual per year for the rate from going from primary to secondary. However, you do lose that maintenance, biannual maintenance of $5,000 every 2 years that we would no longer be responsible. So it kind of cancels it out. So just to outline kind of some of the other ones that were projects that were part of this referendum scope, Jefferson does not have a lift or any ADA accessible way of getting to the stage, which if I'm not mistaken serves as kind of a music room, but also their performance stage. Hopefully we get back to concerts and all of that. So we would be proposing to do a lift. Jefferson site improvements, the east side drive is terribly deteriorating and needs to be replaced as part of the scope. And Jefferson is one of the last schools that doesn't even have a marquee sign whatsoever, and would be considered as part of the site improvements. Madison and Montessori secure entryways, also part of the original referendum scope. These are the only two schools currently that do not have main entrances that at least go directly into a main office where they have to greet somebody, get checked in. There are options here at Montessori and Madison that when they are buzzed in from the exterior, they have immediate access to the rest of the building. And Eisenhower and Longfellow Furniture are the only two schools so far in this referendum that have not received upgraded furniture, and that's been part of the list. So as you total all of that up, and I don't know if I remember stating the total of my proposed budget numbers for these referendum projects at $3,360,000. It is less than what we have projected that we will have left. But at this point, I would say that it is our recommendation that we hold on to these funds. For one, I do not feel that we can fit in any more capital improvement projects for this upcoming summer. And the costs associated with these projects are budget numbers, although I feel they are very healthy, have contingency built into them. We don't know what they're going to come out to be. The projects aren't even bid out yet. A couple of them not even quite designed. At this time, with the extent of projects, I would say that we hold on to those funds. And if we find out when completing these projects that there are funds remaining, it would be our intent to come back to the school board one more time for final referendum funds for your approval. Any questions?
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. Dr. Means, did you have anything to add before I go? Mr. Mayor.
Please, can you go back to the generator slide?
Yes.
I had a panic attack about the network. Not really a panic attack, but no, the three options again, there's could you just bullet point the difference? What are the three options?
Sure. So we could make a plan to replace going forward. So as you know, we're working on doing a updated facility study and then making a long range plan. So we could
but first, what's the generator for? It's backup power, right?
The generator is already something you approved. This is adding the replacement of the transformers. That's the main power to the building. I'm sorry.
So what's the marginal add with the more expensive choices here?
So the marginal add, if we were to plan to replace ourselves, we're looking at.
I mean, functionally, what does it do for us? I'm not asking about dollars. I'm asking about.
It takes the responsibility of the transformers off of the school district and puts it onto We Energies. We are one of only a couple of customers that are on primary service in the state of Wisconsin.
What is primary service?
Primary service is where we own the transformers, we maintain them, and we're responsible for them. So if something happens to them, we have to replace them.
And what do the transformers do?
The transformers are our main.
I understand, but what I'm losing a fundamental point here and I'm trying to pick it up here.
Sure.
Why is this for day-to-day regular power, or is this for emergency power, or what is this for?
The transformers that we have in East High School are for all of the power in the entire school.
Okay. And where is the network hub?
The network?
Yeah.
I can jump in here, Greg. I see where you're leading, Mr. Meyer. If we have no power at East, we have no technology in the district. Every school.
Right.
A lengthy outage. We do have backup, or Greg has backup generators there, and we have battery backup, et cetera, that will last for like short outages that we often get overnight and things like that. But if we've got something that's an extended outage, the entire network will be down. There'll be no internet access. There'll be no IP-based phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. District-wide.
I had emailed to Jamie asking this. So East power at East is, if it goes down, we lose phones, computers, internet in the whole district. So we really want to take good care of power at East.
That is correct.
Because we lose the whole school district if we lose power at East, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I will say that the generator that you did approve, that actually covers the network and everything as well. So it's twofold. This is just an add that I feel we should do.
So
I do think it's worth interjecting that we can sustain losing power at East now. You know, I don't want to give anybody the impression that we can't. But Greg's discovery that those transformers are our responsibility is what the issue is here. So if the transformers go out in the current state, we are responsible for replacing them. And we're not, electrical providers. So that would take us quite a long time, I would imagine. Greg, would you say that?
Yes. Current lead time on new transformers is about 2 months.
Right. Which would mean East would be down. It would be our responsibility. East would be down for 2 months. We don't have enough battery backup to last 2 months. So it would be extremely problematic from an operational standpoint.
So what I'm trying to highlight here is for my vote, what's the option that gives us the least risk of losing power all over the district? And that's functionally, that's what I want to see. So yes, I care about the dollars, but this is a unique kind of question here that affects one building, that affects operations district-wide. So we want to, I'm sure that, everybody will have their own opinion, but I don't doubt, we want to be real sure this is going to be able to sustain all different kind of power disasters. So we want the best we can get. At least that's what I was thinking.
Well, Mr. Meyer, we've always approached it from a risk-reward standpoint or a risk-benefit standpoint. And we've invested appropriately according to risk. What Greg's describing here is a level of risk that we did not know existed before, and which we are now addressing.
Right. I'm just trying to support your proposal. So thank you.
So is it fair to say We Energies could replace those transformers?
To switch from primary to secondary and have them place their own transformer is the least risk going forward for us.
And I think
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to muddle that up.
Right. I don't ask questions very well. I want the least
I
risk.
don't answer them very well.
And it's just light bulb went on my head. Oh my gosh, if we lose East, we lose the whole network. So that's to add extra oomph to your proposal here. That's all I'm trying to do. Sure. Okay. Succinct is not my specialty. So
Ms. Frail.
So this is a hindsight's 2020 kind of question. How did we not know for 50 years that we don't own the transformers?
We've known that we've owned them.
Okay, we've known. So what's the new information?
The new information, well, we've known in the last few years that we've owned them. So with this generator project, when We Energies came in, they said, hey, this is the time to do it. Because of the new switch gears that they are putting in for the generator project itself, this would be the time to make that change if we were going to make that change.
So it's sort of like the boilers of a couple of years back too. I feel like we made some choices knowing that if we were going to do it, now is the time to do it versus having to redo a second time.
Correct. And it wasn't known, at least to me at that time, even though I known that we owned them.
Yep.
How old they were. I actually came across a document in this district a couple of months ago that indicated that they were put in the 1970s.
Okay. So then I guess my request, and this is sort of like a global request, not a specific one. You heard me maybe say earlier that one of the things we sort of tasked Dr. Means to do when he came in was to sort of like get underneath things. Like what have we not looked at under the hood? And I know Mr. Rowland has asked for a while about the long-term list. I would just love to know that when we're creating this list or when we're thinking about long-term capital improvements, we're not making any assumptions, because as a board member, what's been really hard about the things that have been unearthed is you don't know what you don't know until all of a sudden it's put in front of you. So please just know that I can't speak for the whole board. You have my support in making sure that when you find these things out, you bring them to us regardless of the dollar amount or whatnot. So to Mr. Meyer's point, we're thinking about risk and long-term strategy for this work so that we're not caught unawares. Because again, this is like, it's not on the slide, but I don't think many folks in the district would have known necessarily that East supplies power to the district in essence.
Sure.
Dr. Means, and I'll get to you, Mr. Rowland. Could you just how we're going to move forward with this, right? Because some of these are, you and I talked about this, but I think it's worth discussing. Some of these are capital projects that will come up for a vote when we kind of go our RFP. Are there some things that are going to come up to us in March, just so the board kind of knows what you should get ready to vote on for in March and what will kind of come to us as those RFPs come back?
Our director of buildings and grounds needed you to review this evening, and I think we're scheduled to actually vote on March 14th on this. And that's a delay. I think he would have preferred for you to vote tonight, but procedurally we have the discussion. You're giving him the approval with your vote on March 14th to start the process of putting out bids and getting designs for these projects. They will come before you again once those RFPs have been received and they've been vetted. But you're giving him the permission on the 14th of March to start the process of engaging companies and getting designs and sending out final bids.
Thank you. I think it's important to frame that up. This is one of those items where I didn't feel comfortable bringing it to and saying, hey, we're going to vote on it tonight, because there's a lot to uncover, as we've talked about. So I'll go to Mr. Rowland, who's only going to get to vote on one of them initially.
This is fine. My question, I shared this with Dr. Means this week, is I feel a little ill-equipped to vote on this without knowing the big ticket items that could be coming across our desk in the next couple of years. So to me, this like $4.2 million provides us like with a one-time sizable amount of funding that we could use on one larger thing if we needed to. I just don't know if we need that because that hasn't been shared with me, and maybe it doesn't exist and it's just not out there, but I fear that it's out there. And I fear that if in a future year, it will be harder to find $4.2 million just like in a year, right? As opposed to the opportunity we have now that we have $4.2 million in a year. So I guess if it needs to come to us the next meeting, that's okay. Can we at the same meeting though, please have a list of the bigger ticket items that might be coming our way in the next 3 to 5 years? Because I would love to evaluate the pros and cons of each of these other things. To me, it's easy to find, I won't say it's easy to find, it's easier to find $50,000 for an entryway project in the future versus like some millions of dollars of thing that we have to fund in the future. So I don't know how we can do that, or if we can do that in the next couple of weeks, but that's continues to be concerned and continues to not be here.
And to Mr. Allen's point, it's been a concern of his for years.
Yeah.
We're going to go down on this.
Because all of a sudden there'll be some millions of dollars thing.
But it's going to fit.
And it'll have to be paid for in that 1 year. And that'll feel painful. And it won't be for lack of asking.
In the spirit of what Leanne has shared this evening, I've taken your direction. You've asked me to look at all operations. And one thing that I've talked to Greg about very early in August and September was we need a long-range facilities plan. I think that answers your question. We do not have that right now. And so part of the long-range facilities plan allows us to look at the life cycles of all of our different major mechanical systems, plumbing, lighting, roofs, you name it. We don't have that document right now to show us where is our deferred maintenance, where are our pressure points. That's just, again, the charge you've given me is to be strategic and to examine everything. And we don't have that document right now. That's why it's really, we're unable to give you the answer of here's what you're choosing against. A board should always know what you're choosing against. It's one thing to present a plan, but you should know what you're choosing against with that plan. We don't have that long-range facilities plan where we've actually asked experts to come in and do an analysis of all of our life cycles. We did put out for bid that service. We've received 2 proposals or responses to the proposal. We reviewed those proposals today. One is for about $77,000. One is for $19,500. Very different numbers.
Yeah. We have one from what, 17? 17. And then
17, yes.
Take that and build upon it.
And that's what our plan is. Our plan is to take the one from 17, which was part of the planning from the facility advisory committee, and to say, okay, where are we now?
Yeah.
Because 17 was 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, the life cycle on certain things may have deteriorated. And I think once we have an updated long-range facilities plan with an updated review of all of our life cycles, we'll be able to answer with really strong confidence, here's what you're choosing against as a board.
So I'll ask to Mr. Rollins' point then, since we're not going to have that by March, are these things that we're saying are critical and need to be done and we need to vote on? Or are we saying, since the referendum dollars, do we have to use them by a certain time? Or what's pushing us? I don't know. I don't want to ask citizens. Yeah. What would keep us from not doing these things until we have that long range plan when it might be more prudent to kind of have that conversation?
Or are we, if things came up in that long range plan, but they didn't exist when the referendum was done, are we even legally able to do those things? Because we specifically, there are things that we could do that would be wonderful for the district, but we can't do with this money because it doesn't fit within the confines of that defined scope. So I think there may be even a legal question here as to whether or not we could hold on to the $4 million and in a rainy day fund until the big thing happened, but then the big thing doesn't fit within the scope of the referendum language. I feel like that was one thing that was like pounded into our heads about the spending of the referendum money.
That is a good question to follow up. When is the date that the referendum dollars have to be spent by? I don't recall that.
I don't remember. Okay. I can find out.
I can look up those.
I feel like it's in a million things.
What I would say in terms of the project list, we have made a commitment to the Washington Elementary School community. Their site improvements were delayed. They've been very patient, and they've watched the building of the Roosevelt site improvement. So I think that's been I'm just thinking of a student perspective. That's something that is really important, I would say, on that list. The impact of what happened with the technology area, which is a beautiful area at Tulsa East, and how it's impacting the art wing at Tulsa East is something that I would share that we could delay it, but I think it's going to impact instruction and what we do in those areas. And those are too large, that's nearly 2.8 million of what's being recommended here. I guess the last thing I would say, just as someone who's still new to the organization, and Greg is fairly new in his role, one thing that we wanted to honor was the Facility Advisory Committee and their recommendations. And so when you look at the list, we didn't feel we had the ability to pivot too far away from what that advisory committee recommended back in 2017, 2018, that we felt that we needed to stay the course and finish the work that they advised us to do 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you. Mr. Mark.
So I just want to add to this conversation, and I appreciate what Mr. Rollins said, and in principle, I agree with it, what everybody else said as well. So, but my added 2 cents worth is for this transformer. I mean, sure, if a squirrel breaks in and, the proverbial squirrel in the transformer, and we lose the network and phones district wide, well, I hope we keep the transformer funding in your proposal that comes up to vote. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
I did want to. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I did want to reiterate that the transformer piece was just to be transparent, that it was an additional add based on what we found with the generator project, but that all of these other projects were ones that fell under the referendum scope and the project list and presented to the school board in 2020 as being done, and they weren't done. So I felt it right to stand up here in front of you and say, these were not completed as we told you they would for whatever that reason was, uncertainty of funds, transition in with the B&G department, what have you. But I felt very strongly that this district proceed forward with the projects that they did say in 2020 would be completed.
Thank you. Ms. Mayfield?
Okay, thank you. And Greg, this was a great presentation. Thank you for that. The safety and security updates for the entrances, that's going to proceed. I just want to make sure that's going to proceed. I didn't in the priority list here, and then also the service for the transformers. It doesn't matter if, we energies or whether we're primary or secondary, the service response, if something goes down, is still the same.
The service response would actually be greater.
Okay, good. Well, that was easy.
And I think security-wise, you'll note on the list, we don't have a secure entry for the Montessori school,
right,
and for Madison Elementary. So I think there's also some security upgrades with these projects.
Yeah, I would prioritize those higher than some of the other projects.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other board questions or comments on capital improvements? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for staying so late.
Mr. Dolman? This is just a good reminder point. If you go on the Board of Education landing page, there is a link where people can ask questions. So the pace and cadence that we've tried to create is that there's a presentation, one meeting, and then there's a vote the next meeting. So if there are community members who observed this and watched this discussion this evening, please go to that tool and ask questions, and we will respond.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. That's incredibly important. Move on to superintendent report, which I think is the most exciting item we have for tonight. A discussion of proposed change to teachers' compensation system.
Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, I'm so excited to present this. I'm Jennifer Foch, the Director of Human Resources. I've been literally quaking in anticipation all night to do this because I think this is a great win for our organization. So I would just like to lead with that. Part of our rationale to go through this process this school year is that we know we have to retain our high quality educators. We know we need to attract high quality educators to our district, and having a competitive compensation package for our educators is a great way to do both of those things. We also needed a compensation system that is transparent, describable, and predictable for our professional educators. And the current teacher career ladder does not meet that standard for us. We were able to engage collaboratively with the association. So this was truly a group effort, and it was really lovely to be able to sit around a table and have those discussions about what would meet our needs as an organization versus decisions made without that transparency. So we're really appreciative to our colleagues in the association who sat through the process and engaged with us as far back as September to get to the point we're at today. So it's very exciting. To give you a little bit of a visual, we recently started using this tool, Forecast 5. We're able to see salary and experience data among many other data points. And in looking at our salary and years of experience of our teachers compared to some of our districts that we would hold ourselves near to in terms of competition around compensation, every Wauwatosa teacher is plotted in blue here. The other districts have been faded into the background, but you can see our trend line is well below the average trend line of our peer districts. So this is just a visual that really, I think, helps to justify why we need to have this conversation and make these changes now to keep our high quality educators and then attract good educators and be able to give them competitive offers. So the design is simple. It's a single lane system. There are 26 levels and 6 bands within that system. So those bands will allow human resources to work with our hiring managers to be able to have a competitive environment for recruiting and making market adjustments as necessary. So that you'll see is in Appendix A of the summary is the actual system itself with the levels. It's important to note that those levels are not representative of a years of service. So level A is not your first year in the district necessarily. That represents the base salary. So each level is a year in movement on the system. So if you are a teacher at level D, you can expect to move to level E for the next year, provided that you're not on a plan of improvement. So the path forward is really straightforward and clear. There's a 3% increase between each of these levels. So every educator can reasonably expect that 3% increase on an annual basis because it's already built into the system. There are separate in Appendix B, there are some separate off-schedule payments for certain qualifications, hard to fill positions. That will probably be a very fluid list, but a way for us to recognize some of those harder to fill positions and make some adjustments to those folks who hold special certifications like cross-categorical special education or a reading specialist licensure that we know are in short supply right now and we know add value in the classroom. So in terms of implementation, we will have to convert our old and current, current, so hopefully soon to be old scale to our new salary system. The average increase is $1,983. The minimum guarantee is $1,030. So I have to give thanks to Mr. Dixon, our business consultant, who made sure that this modeling could work. And he crunched all of the numbers to make sure that this was definitely possible for us. Some folks will see a max increase of about $3,356. And that is just a function of where folks are in the current salary schedule and where we need to be to get them into the new 26 level system. So, and as previously stated, if you complete the school year, you can reasonably expect to advance provided you're not on a plan of improvement. What we did build in was an extra level. So that's number 2 on Appendix A. So after the 3rd year in the district, an educator would move 2 levels. So if someone's sitting at level C they finish their 3rd year, they will be bumped to level E, for example, and those bumps will occur after 3, 7, and 15 years in the district. So it's a way of honoring years of service with an extra level in terms of a raise. I'd like to invite Kelly Rampelberg to join me. She just would like to give a few thoughts on behalf of the association, and we would be remiss not to include them in this presentation, given we work so well together in this process.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for hanging in so late. This is one of the first meetings I've been in person, and I did not realize they go this late in person. I always fall asleep midway when I'm online. So thank you for hanging in. I'm here on behalf of the team. The team was made up of elementary teachers, middle school teachers, and high school teachers, which was really awesome because we got to have a perspective from each level. The WEA is pleased with the district's willingness to collaborate on such an important topic like teacher compensation. We value the ability to be involved in this inclusive and cooperative effort. We recognize that this collaboration and engagement was valuable because the district and our teachers share a common interest, and that's retaining high quality educators for the students in Wauwatosa. We are extremely pleased with this outcome of this collaboration in which a single lane structure was created, and that provides transparency, accountability, and predictability for the years to come. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Time for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. It's an exciting topic. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
So I have I need somebody to tell me I'm wrong with what I'm about to say, okay? Because I want to be wrong. So I want something I don't understand. So I'm just going to speak in very simple numbers. So, and if I'm not succinct and clear, let me know right away. If I am a teacher and my total compensation this year is $100, 90 is salary, 10 is benefits. So I get $90 salary and $10 benefits. Let's say under this plan, next year, I get $3,000 more salary. So now my salary is 93 in value and my benefits are 10. So my total compensation is now 103. And then let's just assume, just for discussion, and if this breaks my theory, then tell me, but year 2, sure, maybe I still get $103 total, but maybe I get $105 total. And that's 95 salary and $10 benefits, right? The value of my benefit package. Now, so that was, 1 year out, 2 years. Now in the 3rd year, according to this, because the $3,000 next year and the $3 raised next year and the $5 total raise the year after that is paid for by the CARES funding, and we're spending fund balance. This plan, as I'm understanding it, replaces that $5 funding source with changes to the healthcare benefits, the benefits package. Is that right? Kind of, sort of?
I think it would be premature for us to make that statement right now.
But you have all these grids here. I'm just trying to understand that we don't get surprised 3 years from now.
So we stated that we want to make sure that there's a sustainable compensation plan.
Yep.
We have to look at all options.
Okay.
One option is to look at where we are investing our funds in benefits. But there are other opportunities for us to look at the budget and where there are funds and where there are not funds available.
Okay.
I would not presume that to sustain this program long term, that you have to touch employee benefits.
Okay, because a lot of ink is given in this presentation to changing the healthcare packages. And if that's what the teachers want, that's, who am I to say?
I can tell you that's not what they want.
Okay. And here's why. Because the second year out, where $105 total compensation, 95 is salary, and 10 is that's in my model, 10 is benefits. And if we lose that one-time funding and don't find other funding sources, then to keep that $95 salary, I have to cut my benefit value to 5. But then my total compensation goes back to 100. And that's my worry, that we don't unwittingly get to that place where we don't have a funding source that other than like benefits changes. Okay. If we can increase enrollment, if we can find other savings, you know, it can work, but I don't want to rely on converting benefits to salary, because then they actually go back to the $100 a year. When, you know, we're $100 now, 90-10, then we go to 93-10, then we go to 95-10, but the source of the 5 and the 95 disappears. So to keep the 95 salary, we got to drop our benefits to $5, and we're back down to total compensation of $100. Now, in today's world, I don't know. I'd have to ask the teachers, is that what you want? Because other generations than me look at benefits differently. So I don't want to try to impose my values about benefits on other generations. I'm just asking that we watch out for that we don't get us into that spot.
One of the conversations as I've kept the board updated on the development of this model has been, the board has said, how are you going to sustain it? And so we simply provided you with a number of different options for us to look at for sustainability. But I'll go back to the conversation we had earlier around budgeting. There are other revenue streams that we can explore that we may not have as much of a locus of control. That starts with advocacy at the state level in terms of how much money is invested in public education. So, you know, I was transitioning in, but let's just talk brass tacks. When the last state biannual budget was passed, most legislators said, well, you have Esser dollars, use your Esser dollars, school districts, to close your budget shortfall. I'm not used to operating that way. So this fall, we balanced our budget. I did not want to use our Esser dollars or our governor discretion dollars to do that. And I want to give a lot of credit to Mark Duff and the business office team, because we shouldn't just bypass what work we did this fall. A lot of school districts were put in a position where they are using their Esser dollars. And so I don't want to dismiss the 2 years that we are able to fund this new compensation plan. That comes from hard work and conservative budgeting. We'll have to continue to do it. The last thing I would just say in terms of just long-term sustainability of this is ultimately it comes down to values. So that chart that Director Foch showed you at the beginning of the presentation, if you really analyze that chart closely, what it shows is that if a teacher in Wauwatosa had a best friend that was hired in another metro area school system, they may have started at the same dollar mark in terms of how they were being paid. But you see over the years, there's a gap. And so when we talk about retaining people, you can't retain people if they're veterans and they're competent professionals, and they know they can go to another district and make thousands of more dollars for doing the same work. So I appreciate you asking the question, Mr. Meyer. We've discussed this at the table as we conferred and talked, because this was an opportunity for us to collaborate. The staff would ideally not want to have their benefits touched at all, but we have to look at all options in order to sustain.
Okay, I understand that. I'm just trying to be sensitive that we're going to be asked to vote on this next week. And the Appendix C here says 23 to 24, offer 2 or more plan designs to include narrow networks, alternate prescription benefit plans, and direct contracting. And then 24 to 25, it says implement set dollar amount employer contribution, employee pays the difference. 25 to 26, consider incentives to drive costs to other plans, encourage employee self-funding, such as flexible spending plans, health reimbursement arrangements, health savings accounts. Now, I'm accustomed to all those things from my private sector workflow. So I look at this, well, okay, that's the way the world is going. But just so everybody knows, if we vote on this, that this was given to the board using these words, and that it says conceptual, and there's uncertainty.
Correct.
Right, as what you're saying. But I don't want, as Mr. Rollins said, he has only 2 or 3 more meetings left. But I don't want this to be a legacy that's hung on our vote when we were told that nothing was certain, right? I don't want to own that we voted to do this when it only says conceptual, it's only hypothetical. Everybody knows we are fully transparent here tonight about what was presented to the board, and that something is going to have to be figured out. We just don't know what that is right now.
So it would actually be the reverse of what I think you're trying to present. If we didn't give you Appendix C and said, we don't know what's going to happen, we hope that we're able to fund it, then you as a governing board should push back and say, well, why are you presenting this to us? We actually did our due diligence and provided you at least other opportunities for us to look at. And that's not even including, again, still legislative advocacy and us continuing to look at how we're using our funds. So I would say respectfully, Mr. Meyer, it is about concepts. We did give you a pathway where this can be sustained. I think we would have failed you this evening if you didn't have Appendix C. If this proposal was given to you tonight without it, then that would be, I believe, a failure in our leadership to say this is how we can sustain it.
And I'll continue to repeat, the solution to all these things is drive up enrollment because we're a great school district, right? So that's what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, and I would just add to that if we don't make a change to our salary structure, we're not going to have great teachers. If we don't have great teachers, we're not going to have a great school district, which means we don't drive up enrollment. So I think this is a no-brainer that in order to get our teachers to where they need to be and make us competitive, we're going to have to consider. But I also understand that there's some uncertainty in how we figure that out in the future. But to your point, the private sector doesn't know what they're going to do in 2 years either.
Right.
Figure it out.
Absolutely.
And we go and we do. So, sorry, Mr. Rao, go ahead.
Thank you. I got a question from somebody wondering how some other classifications of staff who aren't educators but are still staff, like speech pathologists, occupational therapists, PTs, school psychologists, social worker, counselor, how they factor into this or don't, or if they don't, then what would the model be for that type of, or that class of individual?
All of those classifications of employees you just mentioned are on the teacher contract, so this is applicable to them. They receive the teacher contract, so they would be part of the salary schedule.
I think the uniqueness of those individuals, however, is that on I think Appendix B, where we look at the special certifications, there may be special certifications that those individuals have to hold that they may want us to recognize in Appendix B.
They may also be on a hard to fill list as we look at what we can or cannot fill easily. So there's that too. But in terms of what's their compensation structure, it's the teacher compensation structure.
That's a great point. Yeah. Same for aides, same.
This is not paraprofessional compensation. This is our licensed educators.
Is there going to be a similar process to follow where we look at administrators, principals, aides? Are we going to do that same methodology? Look across the
Our
landscape?
next, great question, Mr. Phillips, and I want to state this publicly. Our next, finding a new salary schedule for our teachers was priority one this year.
Yep.
We have to then recalibrate and go through the same process for our educational assistants and our support staff. They are in just as dire of a situation from a compensation standpoint. But we could only do one thing a year. And this was our primary focus for this year.
I'd love to see the opposite, the leaders as well. You know, they're important.
Ms. Fraley.
A couple of things. One, thank you so much for recognizing that there are actual research-based points in time where teachers leave the classroom and giving them the incentive to stay and not just one step, but the double step. I think that is really innovative and something that not many districts are doing. So I appreciate that it's like based in research. The other thing that is
Ms. Leanne, Ted Craig, who is the UNICEF director for the Wauwatosa Education Association, deserves a lot of credit for that concept.
I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here. There's even more that I think we have the potential to do. So to Mr. Phillips' point, I would love to see us explore next year, specifically for our paraprofessionals who are crucial. We lose our special education aides. We lose our early childhood aides. We can't function effectively, and they are paid at what I would consider poverty wages. And that's not our district. That is universal, and it's awful. And I know it's something that we've talked about and we're committed to. And so there's opportunities, though, for us to be thinking innovatively about how those folks may have a way into the classroom as well. What is our teacher pipeline, and how are we growing that? DPI just changed some of the frameworks in terms of, alternative teacher certification. Like I think we need to consider that alongside pay, and figure out also what are other ways that we can help folks that are in those positions in the short term. Like, so if we can't redo the whole salary structure next year, and there's, some money left over in Esser, I would love to see us do a bump or a bonus or a one-time amount to aides next year to say, stay, give us a chance to treat you well, et cetera. Because I just don't think we can underestimate the role that they play. The last thing I'll just say, and again, I feel like I keep wanting to speak to the public, is that teacher preparation in the state of Wisconsin continues to go down. I was just trying to pull up the actual numbers, but it's since 2011. It has been on a steady decline. And now we're not only just seeing a decline in entering teacher preparation programs, we're seeing a decline in completion of teacher preparation programs. And then on top of that, not to be a negative Nelly, people are leaving the state to go to other states that teach or that pay better. So they're crossing the line into Illinois or into Minnesota, et cetera. So this is a problem that, to Dr. Means' credit, he made it a priority as soon as he came in. You've been working on this, since the fall, with collaboration with the WEA. We have to get ahead of this cliff, because 10 years from now is going to be too late. And so I'm really hoping that over the next couple of years, I said this 3 years ago, COVID was a bit of a distraction, that we can lead in what it looks like to be innovative. We can have our own teacher preparation program. We can work with the consortium to do things to bring in more teachers of color. That, there's tons of funding out there. We just have to have the people in the offices to access it. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you for all the work. Thank you for WEA for putting in the time and effort.
Any other board comments on this item? Obviously, we'll be bringing this back for vote in 2 weeks.
I just want to say thank you. This plan, I got this whole meeting tonight with the bold use of the Esser funds for student welfare, the bold use of the referendum funds for safety, disabilities, and risk mitigation. And this bold plan, we as a district for a long time have planned to win, to plan to be a great district. And it has brought students to our district. And this plan is a plan to win that you presented. And I think it will serve us very, very well. And to plug the teaching profession, folks, it's a hard job, but it's a really good job. And so I encourage anybody out there coming out of high school, looking for a career, teaching is a very good and secure job with good pay and good benefits and a lot of job security. So I encourage everybody to go take a look at it. Thank you.
So our request is that, again, there will be, you'll deliberate and then you'll vote on March 14th.
Great.
Because if we're able to share with staff prior to spring break that there's a new salary system, I think it would be helpful to the culture.
Something tells me some of them might already know.
And I just want to state for our educational assistants and paras, we haven't forgotten about you. That's the next job. We understand it, but this was our priority for this year. I'm glad that we were able to collaborate with our colleagues to, I think, come up with a very attractive system.
Yeah, I would like to thank our members of the association for all your work that you did in working with us. It's fantastic that we had this collaboration. And
because I think most schools, I have to say this and then I'll be quiet. Most school districts made the pivot after Act 10 to say, no, we don't have to collaborate. We don't have to meet and confer. We can create our own system and we can do all of these different things. And, if you don't listen to the people who are actually with students every day and find out what they're seeking and want, I think that does have an adverse impact to the culture. So we worked hard to listen. It didn't hurt that Kelly would bring desserts every once in a while to the meetings as well. So thank you again.
well, and it just makes sense in my mind to collaborate because we all want the same thing. We all want a great education for our students in Wauwatosa. So why would we be at odds? Mr. Rowland?
Just a quick point. I think on board docs, I don't think Appendix C is in the document.
It's not.
Yeah.
I think it was
okay, I just wanted to. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's great.
I think that was said, but I just couldn't remember it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Foch. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to final public comment on items that are either on the agenda this evening or were not on the agenda. We'll start with folks in the room. If you would like to speak, please come forward. And then if you're online, please raise your hand and we will get to you next. Jamie, I don't see anyone in the room. We'll close public comment in the room. Is there anyone online?
Yeah, we have a few hands raised.
Go ahead.
Mary Jo Randall, please state your name and address.
Mary Jo Randall, 727 North 59th Street. I want to follow up on Mr. Meyer's initial comments regarding benefit changes. It appears that the benefits that are being discussed are post-retirement benefits. And I'm very surprised to hear that teachers are okay with considering changes to their post-retirement benefits, especially our teachers with longevity in the district. So I hope, well, you need to have a very clear total package presented to you to vote on, not just the salary. You need to have a clear package of total compensation with the numbers attached, using Mr. Meyer's example numbers, but with the real numbers. And to that point, I'm also a little leery about doing this type of transaction or agreement without a business services director. I know that Mr. Dixon has some experience with retirement benefit plans, some good, some not so good. So please make sure that you have a clear picture of the total package. Thank you.
Next is Julia Haskey. You have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
My name's Julia Haskey. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Madison Elementary School. My address is 904 South Main Street, Saukville, Wisconsin. I just have a few questions that I would like to come back to with Ms. Fouch and with Dr. Means about the compensation package. I appreciate the fact that we're working on that, but I'm very confused as to about if we're not going to base it on years of service or even things that we've done in the school community, where I would come in on this new plan based on my 9 years of service and my education level. So that's one question. My other question, and I know it's a common question that a lot of people are having, do we have to negotiate which level we come in at? Is that going to be cut and dry, or is that something that each individual teacher is going to have to negotiate? The other question that came up while you were talking tonight, and I know it just came up a few minutes ago, that Appendix C wasn't made available to us. We weren't aware of a change in our benefits based on this plan. So those are things that I will follow up on later, and I'm sure other staff members will follow up on later, but those are common concerns that we will have. Thank you.
Maureen Brady, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Yeah, thank you. Maureen Brady. I'm an English teacher at Tosa West, and I live at 2242 North 73rd Street here in Tosa. I just want to thank everyone involved in putting forward this new salary schedule, but would like to echo the previous concerns. I'm just wondering if the district can provide more information on how current teachers are going to be placed on the new pay scale, what metrics or considerations are being put into place to appropriately place existing teachers. Thank you.
Katie Wilkes, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Katie Wilkes, 1236 Woodside Street, Delafield. Teacher at Underwood. This is my 20th year in the district, and I am currently the president of the Wauwatosa Education Association. I want to thank Dr. Means for meeting with our team. Not a committee member, but I have been kept abreast, and also for the continued collaboration in our monthly meet and confer meetings with Dr. Means. I also want to put a plug in for the upcoming forum for the school board members, which will be held in the Firefly Room from 5:30 to 7 o'clock on Wednesday. We hope to see everyone there.
Okay. Nicholas Kepke, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
I'm Nicholas Kepke, English teacher at Wauwatosa West High School. I'm a resident of Menominee Falls. I just wanted to echo some of the previous comments as well from other teachers that have come on. Being my 10th year in the district, I'm kind of at a loss for where I would stand on this current system. And to be completely transparent, if the system were to be put in place, I'd be making currently probably only about $6,000 more than what the base salary would be stated at as a incoming teacher. And so I would be curious as to how the conversations would be going with administration and or human resources department, especially conversations with at West where we, and again, kudos to Mr. Hughes, he's doing an incredible job right now, but we don't have a principal set in place for next year. And so who would be doing our evaluations and where we would be setting in on that pay scale. And then also just to from the benefit issue with that, I'm a little bit concerned with these benefits. Currently, my family is on the Wauwatosa benefit plan. We had switched over from my wife's benefit plan. She's also a teacher. But now if the benefits are going to be changing, we're going to have to reevaluate that situation. So just a couple of things that I think a lot of teachers would like some clarification on. Thank you.
We have no more hands raised.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Consider a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Anger,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Neufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Sure.